of Scampton are thinking of doing that today. Wethersfield is also going to be a base. Isn't it remarkable that our Home Office, the people tasked with keeping us safe, are claiming a victory in the cause to have several thousand young men plonked in rural communities? In other news, Putin, Russia, it was an absolute mess over the weekend. But what does all of this really mean for Britain? And will Putin go nuclear? We're also going to be talking a lot, of course, about this, aren't we, as well? His royal homelessness. Prince William has stepped up to the plate and is vowing to end homelessness. I'm going to be talking about that and comparing his charitable work to that of a certain other prince as well. And finally, yes, why not? Oh, headless shot, there we go. Get your kits off. Now, it's just 2 days, less than 48 hours until I get my kits off on stage with the Dream Boys for charity. I had my chest waxed at the weekend because you wonderful people managed to raise £60,000. Yes, I did video it. Yes, we will be playing that later this hour. Patrick Christys on GB News. It's a bit itchy. Anyway, right, email in gbviews@gbnews.com. Back to more serious matters now. Would you protest an asylum seeker base in your town? gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, though, headlines.
Hello, good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 2 minutes past 3. Well, we can start with some breaking news in the last half an hour. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a passenger was fatally stabbed on a tram in Nottingham. Police were called to the Highbury Vale tram stop just after 11 o'clock this morning. The victim, in his 30s, died at the scene. So that news just in. More on that as we get it. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says it's too early to predict what will happen in Russia following an attempted coup by Wagner Group mercenaries. The Kremlin has posted the first video of President Putin since the mutiny, making a statement to young engineers. It's not clear when or where it was recorded. The whereabouts of Wagner leader Prigozhin is also unclear. He was last seen leaving the military headquarters in Rostov on Saturday. Rishi Sunak says the West is watching the developments closely.
I've spoken to the leader of the United States, but also France and Germany over the weekend. We're completely coordinated on our response to this. It's a situation that we've been monitoring for some time, the instability that would be caused by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And what we saw over this weekend is an example of that coming to the fore. It's obviously too early to predict with certainty what might happen as a result of this, but I'm in close touch with our allies and we're monitoring the situation closely.
Well, the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, told GB News Russians now view President Putin differently.
The Putin image in Russia is invulnerable leader is completely destroyed. The whole world understands who is the Putin, but now many people understand it in Russia. And with that situation, I think that the armed forces of Ukraine definitely use this opportunity to increase the efficiency and intensiveness of our counteroffensive and receive the certain results.
An inquest has been told Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning and that there was no evidence she was harmed. The mother of two disappeared in January whilst walking her dog along the River Wire in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. A Home Office pathologist told the inquest she had not been drinking before her death. Other experts have also been giving evidence, saying the river was just 4 degrees, almost freezing, and inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal. Police searching for a woman in Derbyshire have found a body at a lay-by near Chesterfield. Sarah Henshaw disappeared more than a week ago, last seen at her home in Ilkeston. Police say they believe the body, which was discovered on the A617, is that of the 31-year-old. Her family has been informed. Detectives have been granted more time to question a man who's been arrested on suspicion of murder. The boss of an organised crime group which smuggled hundreds of people in and out of the UK has been jailed for 10.5 years. Mohammed Mokhtar Hussain was arrested in May 2021 following a National Crime Agency investigation. He was behind a London-based group which used a network of lorry drivers to move people across the Channel. They included a number of fugitives fleeing the UK who were wanted for serious crimes such as child abuse and murder. Matthew White has been identified as a suspect in the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence in south-east London 30 years ago. The Met Police says White, who died in 2021, aged 50, was arrested twice, but there was not enough evidence to prosecute him. In a statement prompted by a BBC investigation, the force admitted a significant and regrettable error was made during the initial investigation. Stephen's mother, Baroness Lawrence, has said the failure to properly investigate a main suspect in a murder case is so grave that it should be met by serious sanctions. The chief executive of Ofwat has written to South East Water requesting an urgent meeting because of its hosepipe ban. David Black said supplies are below what is expected and he's concerned about restrictions being brought in during the year's first spell of hot weather. South East Water introduced a ban to its customers in Kent and Sussex after 6,000 properties experienced interruptions or had water supplies cut off 2 weeks ago. People breaching restrictions could face a fine of up to £1,000. The Prince of Wales has launched an initiative aimed at ending homelessness. Prince William's 5-year project called Homewards aims to make rough sleeping a thing of the past. Initially focusing on 6 locations, local businesses will be asked to develop action plans with up to £500,000 in funding. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
OK, loads on the show today to get us going. Loads of anger about an asylum seeker base. We'll be going there very, very shortly. We're also going to be talking about the situation in Russia, what that means for Britain. But I want to start about this because I think this is actually a really, really important issue. There is really no comparison between Prince William and Prince Harry anymore, is there? One has just vowed to end homelessness and the other moved home to America and then tried to burn his old house down, metaphorically speaking, with his whole family inside. William wants to help take 300,000 people off the streets and out of insecure accommodation by giving around £3 million to 6 sites and even confirming that he would be using some of his own estate to build more housing. So, firstly, all of those anti-monarchists and the usual miserable sad acts criticising him have a day off. OK, what are you doing for charity? What's your contribution to the world? Yes, he's rich. Yes, he's got loads of land. Well, now he's using some of that wealth and land to help save lives. Legend. His brother, on the other hand, well, you know, Harry likes to bang on about charity work, doesn't he? There are a lot of headlines out there. I'll just read one of them now. Harry and Meghan do charity work in Santa Barbara. And then you look into it and it's actually them sitting in a room with some kids talking about mean tweets and their own feelings. There is some other news out there about Harry's charitable work. The Archwell Foundation has raised $13 million since its formation after Megxit in 2020, one article reads, giving away $3 million in grants, it has emerged, with experts asking what they will do with the remaining $10 million and how much was spent on staff and administration. Apparently, Harry and Meghan spent just 1 hour a week working on Archwell. Archwell drew in just £3,700 in public donations and gave out approximately £2 million in grants. But the vast majority of their money, £8 million reportedly, came from a single wealthy backer, with another forking out £2 million. It isn't known who the money came from. Well, to be fair, and this is really important, Harry has genuinely done a huge amount of charity over the years. The Invictus Games is amazing, and I know he does a lot with groups like Well Child, for example. But my overarching point is this. Harry seems to do a lot of the little drop-ins these days, doesn't he? A lot of talking and not a huge amount of action. And bear in mind that he is setting himself up as this do-gooder in the world. I'm not sure that chimes in, does it? He is clearly, in my view, more obsessed with slamming his royal family, the British press, and playing the victim than he is using his own immense privilege and wealth to help others. What Prince William wants to do now is truly iconic. It will be well thought through, it will be well executed, it will be well funded, and he's putting both his own money and his own land where his mouth is. This will be Prince William's legacy, the man who ended homelessness. Harry's legacy is Oprah. William is a proper charity champion, whereas at times Harry is just a charity case. All right, I want to hear from you on this. GBViews at gbnews.com. I will have the latest on both William and Harry a little bit later on, but we're getting stuck right in with our top story, and that is that on Friday, I broke the news that the prospect of 1,700 exclusively male migrants being moved into a disused airfield in Essex was one step closer. Well, this evening, attention turns to Lincolnshire, where the RAF air base, used by the Dam Busters, and I believe the Red Arrows as well, could soon house around 2,000 male asylum seekers. Scampton is a possible alternative to placing migrants in expensive hotels, but a motion from the Liberal Democrat councillor is calling for a halt to the government's plans. I will cross live to Lincolnshire very, very shortly. But, as I just mentioned, on Friday's decision by the Court of Appeal not to block government plans to place asylum seekers at Wethersfield Airfield, the case was brought by Braintree District Council, where, incidentally, the local MP is Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. We now have this ridiculous situation where our Home Office, the people who are tasked with keeping us safe, people who are tasked to a large degree with protecting our borders, are essentially celebrating a victory that would allow a lot of undocumented, mostly young men, to essentially squat in a rural part of the country at the taxpayers' expense, bringing down the house prices and, of course, with massive concerns about public safety. It's a funny old world, isn't it? Well, I did speak briefly to Alan Mackenzie, who is the Fields Association in Wethersfield. I am delighted to say Alan joins me again now. And Alan, thank you very, very much. It's great to have you in to talk a bit more about your case, but also Scampton, because you are now, I believe, you're joining forces. Is that right? Where are you up to? Because in total, we could have over 3,000 young men now dumped in completely unsuitable sites around the United Kingdom against the wishes of local MPs, against the wishes of cabinet ministers, against the wishes of local councillors, and crucially, against the wishes of local residents like you.
Well, as you're aware, on Friday, Braintree District Council's appeal in respect of the injunction they placed upon the Home Office for starting development work up on the airbase, and in respect to whether it was an emergency or not, failed. However, although the injunction was expected to fail, fortunately, the judges did not want to express an opinion on whether it was an emergency or not, which has allowed that particular part of the case to go into the judicial reviews. And Braintree District Council, West Lindsey District Council, which is where Scampton is based, and a local resident to Wethersfield are all together bringing a judicial review to a permission hearing, which is due on the 12th and 13th of July, to hear whether the judicial reviews can go ahead. We would expect that they will be able to go ahead, and the judicial reviews will look at the entire process through which the Home Office and the Department of Levelling Up have looked at these sites, and whether the process has been done properly, whether it's been done fully, whether it's been done, in fact, honestly, quite frankly, because they're only meant to be there for 12 months, but their intention, we know, as expressed in open court, is to be there an awful lot longer. The judicial reviews have a pretty good chance of holding all this up, at the very least. OK, right, lots to go out there. So, as you've rightly identified, what they are trying to say, the Home Office and the government, is that these sites will be temporary and that they have no real ambition to have these people there for any longer than 12 months. What you're saying to me, as somebody who has been all over the legalities of this, is that they admitted that that wasn't true in court. Is that right? Totally. They're using something called Class Q, which is part of planning legislation in relation to Crown land, to enable them to use some Crown land, in this respect, Scampton and Wethersfield air bases, on a 12-month basis. It used to be 6 months prior to COVID. During COVID, it was extended to 12 months. It's never reverted back to 6 months, so it's always meant to be temporary. But in open court, the Home Office's King's Counsel has admitted that it will be there for more than 12 months. And all the work that's being done, particularly at Wethersfield, is evidence of that. We know it's going to be there for more than 12 months. They've admitted it's going to be there for more than 12 months. Right. And that is part of the judicial review, and the process that's been going on is going to be queried at the Home Office. What is interesting is that your
local MP, or the local MP for the area anyway, is James Cleverly, our Foreign Secretary, Conservative. Now, when we look at what's been going on around the Scampton area, it's a local Lib Dem council that has got involved there as well. Now, as I understand it, it's another fascinating situation because people all mean, oh, this has got cross-party support, and in a sense, it has, and that's great. But I believe what the Lib Dems are saying is a little bit like what Labour MPs say when they don't want a barge somewhere near there, which is that this is inhumane for the migrants, and we can't have that. I would politely suggest that we should be really focusing more on the human rights of the local residents, like people like you. And is that your main concern? Because I've already found out from a property expert who I had on just before you on Friday, who said to me that you can expect your house price to go down by about 5%.
Yeah, there is circumstantial evidence that people have found it more difficult to sell houses around the area. That's true. To what extent house prices will be affected, nobody knows currently, because it hasn't really happened. It hasn't taken a great deal of effect on house prices yet, but it is obviously a concern. It is the impact of having just so many asylum seekers on an airbase which is so remote. There is no infrastructure here to support them. It's miles away to the nearest hospital. It's 9 miles away to the nearest A road. It's B roads, it's unclassified roads all the way around. There was an example on Friday when the Home Office tried to get some very large porta cabins, wide loads, up to the airbase. They couldn't go any further than Sybil Headingham, which is a nearby village. They were stuck and had to turn back and go away. That was just an example of how difficult it is to support something of this sort of size in the middle of nowhere, which is what it is. Locals are concerned about the general impact it will have of 1,700 people. Where do they go? They're not detained. They'll be kept busy on the airbase as much as possible. But on a lovely sunny day like this, they'll be out wandering the beautiful Essex countryside out here, going down country lanes which have got no footpaths. The speed limit is 60 miles an hour. They're going to be in danger doing that. And what is the Home Office going to do? It's going to tell the asylum seekers it's not a good idea to go out walking around here. They really haven't thought this out properly. No. It's too big. If they scaled it back to something which was supportable, sustainable, locals would begrudgingly sort of support it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. There's also the risk of people just absconding, as indeed loads of people are, because if they think that there's any kind of whiff whatsoever of the fact that they might actually be deported, then you'd leg it, wouldn't you? Which is what loads of people are doing. Where do they go? What do they do? Well, I'll tell you what they do is they just hang around your area, and then they become even more desperate, don't they? So anything can happen. I think it's an absolute crying shame this is happening because of an area of just natural beauty to begin with. Certainly when it comes to Scampton as well, an incredibly historic site. So you could argue that that should be preserved just in its own right as a result of that. But you've got the safety issues. And then people like you are just being told to suck it up. What happens if there's a murder, or if there's something terrible that goes on, or a schoolgirl is attacked on her way into school, or something along those lines? Will you guys just have to suck that up again and deal with it? I'm sorry, but I don't think I would be inclined to. Look, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, because I'm going to go over to Scampton now. But Alan, thank you. And I would look, we're going to be... What's the big date for the next court hearing again?
12th and 13th of July. It's a 2-day hearing. All
right, we'll be all over that, Alan. Thank you very much. It's Alan Mackenzie there, who is the chair of Fields Association in Wethersfield. We are now going to Scampton to get more on the future of RAF Scampton. Now, this evening's meeting will take place, actually, in a place called Gainsborough, and we can go there now, actually, and speak to GBNews reporter Jack Carson. Jack, yes, thank you very, very much. What's going on where you are, or will be about to happen anyway, presumably in that building behind you?
Yeah, so this is West Lindsley District Council, Patrick, where tonight, as you were mentioning just a little bit earlier on, that the motion that's been put down by a Lib Dem councillor here will take place. It will be voted on by the councillors here. The motion calls for the government's plans and the the government's plans to house asylum seekers at RAF Scampton to be halted, as well as, of course, then involve Lincolnshire Council to then join with West Lindsley Council to, quote, stand for evidence-based consultative decisions that align with the welfare and aspirations of the residents here and those seeking asylum within the UK. This has all been brought forward and tabled by Councillor Sebastian Haig, who is a Liberal Democrat councillor here on the council. He says that this issue is more than a critique of a single decision. It's an indictment of an absence of common sense and empathy in leadership that he says this area is witnessing from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Now, we know, of course, it was back in March when the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, announced that Scampton would be considered and used as a place to house asylum seekers with the very basic essential living needs of porta cabins essentially put on around the base to house them. But of course there are a lot of concerns that although they would be self-contained and the migrants would be living in a separate part of the base in the area, the fact is that they would be free to come and go as they please. The situation then and housing these migrants at RAF Scampton would also halt £300 million worth of regeneration which had been set up between the district council here and Scampton Holdings. It was going to supposedly create thousands of jobs, but with these plans the government is holding in place, it looks like those will be halted for now or even possibly stopped completely. So that's where a lot of the critique of this plan has come from, not necessarily the idea to house asylum seekers on the base, although that is very much still part of the problem. It is the stopping and the halting of this massive worth of investment in the area. Now, Sir Edward Lee, who is the MP here, has also questioned in the Commons multiple times how exactly the government is going to preserve those listed buildings on the site of Scampton, how it's going to protect, of course, the heritage of the famous dam busters, and how it's also going to protect the safety of the 1,000 people that already live on the site, and of course that primary school there as well. Now, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick did say in response to those questions in the Commons that the policy was in the national interest and he understood the impact and concern, but there were no intentions to make use of those heritage buildings, and the heritage of the site would be protected.
Jack, thank you very, very much. We're going to be going to Jack Carson for regular updates on this show as that story develops. Jack Carson there, GB News' reporter. Now, you can get loads more on this story on our website. Go to gbnews.com, which is, of course, the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got the best analysis, big opinion, and all the latest breaking news. I want to know from you, would you be protesting if they wanted to put an asylum seeker base in your area? GBviews at gbnews.com. But after the failed coup in Russia, I am asking today, is this the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin? Crucially, what does it mean for Britain? What does what's just happened in Russia mean for us over here? And, arguably even more crucially, will he go nuclear? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
News Radio.
OK, welcome back. Now, in a few minutes, I will be talking about Prince William's new campaign to end homelessness and compare his work to his brother's as well. But Vladimir Putin has made his first public statement since the attempted coup. But he didn't mention the recent events that took place over the weekend. His defence minister, Sergei Shoigu, visited troops in his first public appearance since the Wagner leader demanded that he and military chief Valery Gerasimov should be handed over to restore justice. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has said that Britain is preparing for a range of scenarios that may unfold following the failed mutiny by Wagner mercenaries in Russia. He told broadcasters that he's been in close touch with allies who are monitoring the situation closely. Look, few issues at play for me here anyway. What does all of this really mean for us here in Britain? What's the state of Putin at the moment? Is there any chance that he might go nuclear? Here to talk about that and give a bit more background as well is our national reporter, Paul Hawkins. Paul, let's just start with what on earth has happened then.
So, let's just backtrack a little bit. Who is Yevgeny Prigozhin? He was known as Putin's chef. Came out of prison in the early 90s, started off as a hot dog salesman in Moscow, then ended up owning a restaurant, then moved on to catering firms, got a number of catering contacts with the Kremlin. That's where he made his contacts with Vladimir Putin. So he was known as Putin's chef. Then he formed Wagner in 2014 during the Crimea invasion. Wagner, essentially a mercenary force, mercenaries available for hire. Not just in Russia, where we know they've been fighting alongside the Russian military. They've also been serving in places in Africa, including Mali, Central African Republic, Libya, and also most notably Syria, where they helped prop up the Assad regime. So they're available for hire. They've been part of the war in Ukraine, fighting alongside the Russians. They're known for being really fierce fighters. About 80% of the Wagner fighters are from prisons. They are serving convicts recruited into the Wagner force to fight alongside Vladimir Putin. Why does Vladimir Putin, why would he use mercenaries? Because it's a way of plausible deniability, saying, nothing to do with me, Russia weren't responsible for this. So, most significantly, since the turn of the year, they were key in taking Bakhmut. That's a town of around 70,000 people. Thousands of their fighters were killed taking Bakhmut. And one of the principal criticisms of the Russian military and the Russian government by Prigozhin is that they didn't give enough ammunition. So this started off a series of rants, particularly a video most recently, where he's standing in front of the bodies of fighters saying, look what's happened. Look at these fighters. He refers to Vladimir Putin as Happy Grandpa, which is one of the sort of slightly derogatory nicknames for him, saying, Happy Grandpa must be happy with this because, look, we haven't got enough ammunition and this is what's happening to our men here. He takes a lot of stabs at Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov. That's the Russian defence minister and the Russian chief of staff. Get stuck into them as well. They've got history as well. And then fast forward to Friday, we then get these rants, and then into Saturday we get the FSB, the Russian Secret Service, effectively saying, what he had done was he'd questioned the Kremlin's motives for the war, and the FSB hit back, denouncing Yevgeny Prigozhin and opening an investigation into him.
Right.
He gathers all these troops and then he starts marching out of Ukraine up the M4 towards Moscow, a column effectively of artillery and men heading for Moscow. And then about 8 hours later, Saturday night, instead of heading for Moscow, he's heading for Minsk, the capital of Belarus, because all of a sudden the announcement comes from the Russian government and from the Belarusian government that a deal's been done, amnesty for Prigozhin, he can go to Belarus, amnesty for the Russian fighters, no charges, especially if you sign up for the Russian military, which was already something that the Russian military has been trying to do for some time. There's a deadline on the 1st of July this Saturday that essentially, if you fight for a mercenary, you need to sign this new contract. So effectively, you're signing for the so you're fighting for the Russian military. Since then, Moscow was on lockdown. It's not now. And effectively, we're asking, where is Yevgeny Prigozhin, first of all? Where is he? Because he never confirmed that he was going to Belarus. What's going to happen in terms of Vladimir Putin's reaction? He gave a speech today talking to young engineers, said nothing himself. We saw the Defence Minister, Sergei Shoigu, touring the Ukrainian front line. That was a clear message saying, look, I'm not going to fire that was Vladimir Putin saying, I'm not going to fire my defence minister as Prigozhin wants me to do. And then what's going to happen to the Wagner fighters? How would you feel if you're...
This is it.
Yeah, go on.
Well, no, this is it, isn't it? Which is that, where are they? What are they doing? What does this mean for Ukraine, given that a load of people have just withdrawn and tried to march on Moscow and now they're going somewhere near Minsk? And also, what kind of headspace is Vladimir Putin going to be in as well? And will this make it more or less likely for him to do something drastic? Will there be some kind of internal coup? And again, what will all of this really mean for Britain? What is the best-case scenario for Britain? There's so many unanswered questions here, aren't there, really, which are going to emerge over the next few days.
Yeah, indeed. And just one more thing I would add is that in terms of what happens to Yevgeny Prigozhin, he's gone quiet, which is not like him, because he's clearly a man who likes to rant. He's a very emotive guy. Vladimir Putin was asked in an interview a few years ago, are you able to forgive? And he said, yes, but the only thing I can't forgive is treason.
Yeah.
So Yevgeny Prigozhin...
Well, look, it's reasonable to suspect that if Vladimir Putin chock someone on the streets of Britain, then if you decide to drive a military column towards Moscow, I think it's reasonable to suggest that you might not have that long left, but we'll have to wait and see. Well, Paul, thank you very much. Paul Hawkins there, our national reporter. I've got more on this story in a couple of minutes, but first... in fact, I won't just be doing that as well. We're also going to be talking about Prince William's bid to end homelessness, which I think is absolutely massive. That will be his legacy. He could well end up being the guy who ended homelessness, which is a pretty good way to be remembered, I think, isn't it, as well? And, yes, it's nearly the Dream Boys time. As I've been saying as well, thank you very much to everybody who's been donating. I've been trying to raise some money for the mental health charity Mind, and I got my chest waxed at the weekend because you lovely people hit 60 grand. It has been filmed. I'll be playing you that shortly. Now, though, headlines with Tanti.
Patrick, thanks very much. Here are the headlines at 3:30. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says it's too early to predict what will happen in Russia following an attempted coup by Wagner Group mercenaries. The Kremlin has posted the first video of President Putin since the mutiny, making a statement to young engineers. It's not clear when or where it was recorded. The whereabouts of Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin is still unknown. He was last seen leaving the military headquarters in Rostov on Saturday. A man in his 30s has died after being stabbed on a tram in Nottingham. The attack in Basford in the north of the city happened at around 11 o'clock this morning. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. An inquest has been told Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning and that there was no evidence she was harmed. The mother of two disappeared in January whilst walking her dog along the River Wyre in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. A Home Office pathologist told the inquest she had not been drinking before her death. Other experts have also been giving evidence, saying the river was just 4 degrees, almost freezing, and inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal. The world's second largest cinema chain, Cineworld, has announced it will file for administration in the UK. The move, set to take place next month, is part of a restructuring plan. Holders will be affected, but the company, which has more than 100 cinemas across the UK and Ireland, says their British venues will continue to operate as normal. The Prince of Wales has launched an initiative to end homelessness. Prince William's 5-year project, called Homewards, aims to make rough sleeping a thing of the past. Initially focusing on 6 locations, local businesses will be asked to develop action plans with up to £500,000 in funding. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2707 and €1.1648. The price of gold is £1,513 and 62 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,453 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Lots of talk about Russia, not enough talk about us right here in the UK, I think. I'm joined now by the former advisor to the Ministry of Defence, NATO and the United Nations. It's Gwythian Prince. Gwythian, thank you very, very much. How on earth does whatever is going on in Russia affect us here in Britain?
Very directly, Patrick. This is a moment for cool heads. We need to set on one side the things that we don't know about, and that's most of the detail that people are speculating about, and concentrate on the big picture. The big picture is that this is the pivot moment in this war, because, as is well known to all military commanders, morale is to material as 3-1. And that means in this war, the Ukrainians are about 6-1. And at this moment, I would guess that Russian morale is through the floor. And also, just look at what happened. In the space of 6 hours, the Wagner Group walked into Rostov-on-Don, which is the military and the logistics headquarters for the entire operation of the Russian war in the south of Ukraine. So this is the moment, going back to the Battle of Waterloo, when the Duke of Wellington said to the guards, up guards and at 'em. So the Ukrainians are now going to need to move quickly onto the offensive. So what it means for us is two things. One, we now need to move to full backup. No ifs, no buts, the same sort of full-hearted support with full decisiveness, which was given at the very beginning of the war when Boris Johnson backed up Ben Wallace to provide those famous anti-tank weapons without which the Blitzkrieg in February of 22 might have happened. So we need to do all of that. We need also to put full pressure on the Americans to speed up the release of the F-16 Viper aircraft, the air superiority planes, and also the A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft, which haven't been much discussed, but for which the Ukrainians have also been training. So that's the detailed bit. But what we've also got to remember is that UK is under attack, and I use the word advisedly, on another front, which most people aren't aware of. We are at the moment being put under huge pressure by the European Union to submit ourselves back under control of the EU in the military area through a thing called permanent structured cooperation. And this we must not do. And I think, frankly, that ministers don't really understand much of this. I was before the Select Committee on European Security on the 17th of May and explaining all of this, chapter and verse. And I think that it came as something was a surprise to the MPs. The officials, I think, either don't understand it, or if they do understand it, which is even worse, they actually support the idea of compromising our sovereign independence on defence at this time, which is not acceptable.
Gwythian, can I ask you a little bit to expand on what you've just said there about the European Union and trying to rope us in again to some kind of military bloc? What is that?
I certainly can, Patrick, because people viewing need to be really aware of this. Ever since the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union, the EU has been pushing and pushing to create a military dimension to the EU. It's a pointless thing to do because NATO is the organization which has kept the peace for 80 years and will keep the peace on into the future. But it's being pushed principally by President Macron. And the intention is partly to punish us and partly to deprive us as the only tier one military power in Europe of the leading role which we have had in supporting the Ukrainians, and indeed with the attempt now to block Ben Wallace from becoming the next Secretary General of NATO, of having, as we have traditionally had, the number 2 role in NATO. And it's done, as I said, through something called permanent structured cooperation. And as with the EU, everything is always in the detail. The devil is always in the detail. As I said, and I spelled all this out for the Select Committee on the 17th of May. Anybody who wants to watch it or read it can go online and see all of that, chapter and verse. Interestingly, the Ministry of Defence, for the first time in my long career, did me the honour of issuing a press release suggesting, without naming me, that my evidence was incorrect, which wasn't. So it gave me a reason to give the committee a full and very detailed rebuttal, explaining why I was right and the officials in the MOD were wrong. So we've got to watch this. If we were not at war, these games in the sandpit, if I may put it somewhat contemptuously, wouldn't matter so much. But we are in the middle of a war, and it therefore matters a great deal. The attempt is, in the first instance, to hoik us under EU control through something called military mobility, which is an attempt by the EU to take over from NATO the transportation of materiel and machines within the continent of Europe, something which NATO ought to be doing, not the EU at all. The EU has no place in any of this. And this is a real and present threat. I'm sorry to have to put it as bluntly as that, but people are simply not aware. It's the other edge of the pincer, Patrick, of which the Northern Ireland Protocol is the other pincer. An attempt to keep the UK in what's called high dynamic alignment with the EU. And people know about the Northern Ireland Protocol and the so-called Windsor framework. They're not aware of PESCO. They need to wake up and be aware of it now.
Well, I think
we now need to be pushing to support the Ukrainians absolutely 100%.
OK, I think you've woken a few people up with that. Thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, and I hope to talk to you again very, very soon in even more detail on these topics. There's Gwithian Prince there, who is, and by the way, this is really the main reason why you should all listen to what this chap has to say, the former advisor to the Ministry of Defence, NATO and the United Nations. Concerning stuff, but what he's saying is now is the time for even more action. Let's get the Russians on the run, is his view. Now, there is just 2 days to go until I dance with a group of male strippers. That's a juxtaposition of stories, isn't it? So, to get ready for my big night, I got my chest waxed on Saturday, and yes, it hurt a lot. We will have footage of this very shortly. I am, of course, doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. I will also be discussing Prince William's bid to end homelessness. Don't you dare move. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Just after 4 o'clock, I will have the very latest on the fight to stop 2,000 male migrants being housed at the RAF base that was also used by the dam busters. But the Prince of Wales has today, ironically, launched something called Homeward, an ambitious campaign to end homelessness in the UK within 5 years. However, with anti-monarchy group Republic accusing the Prince of hypocrisy given his vast wealth and collection of palaces, can he convince the doubters that this is more than a publicity stunt? Let's get more, I think, on the Prince of Wales' rather large 3 homes, shall we? So a bit of detail. His main residence is Adelaide Cottage, a 4-bedroom property in Windsor Castle's Home Park. In London, he has Kensington Palace's 20-room apartment 1A. He also has Anmer Hall, a mansion on the King's private Sandringham estate in Norfolk. And as the Duke of Cornwall, he owns almost 135,000 acres of land in 23 counties in the UK. So, remarkably, people are still criticising him for this. But anyway, in answer to these critics, a spokesperson for Prince William said, the Prince of Wales is in a very fortunate position. He has been shining a light on homelessness for decades. He could sit there and continue to shine a light on it, or he could make a big gesture or do what some people would see as a PR stunt. But this is about creating a programme that is truly sustainable and will create systemic change in the homelessness system. So, there we go. Can I just say, this absolutely winds me right up here, that people criticise, they say, oh, the monarchy shouldn't exist. All right, well, if groups like Republic had it their way, as far as I can tell, you'd abolish the monarchy, but presumably William would just keep all of those houses and land and be able to do whatever he wants with them. But we keep the monarchy, and now he's going to use it for good, and that's still wrong, and that's still bad. I mean, he is going to be the future king, for goodness sake. I mean, where do you want him to live? In a council flat in Slough? More on this now with GB News' royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. So, William is looking to seriously end homelessness.
Yeah, he wants to make it rare, brief and unrepeated. And during this 5 years, he's chosen, and his team have chosen 6 locations across the UK, and they're going to become blueprints to end homelessness in the future, because all of these locations have slightly different problems. Maybe one is to do with young people's mental health, one person's to do with addiction and so on. So that's the idea behind it. Now, I've spoken to many people very close to the Prince of Wales who work with him daily, and what they've told me is that he has put hours and hours into this project. He isn't just turning up for an hour to do a speech or whatever. He has been sitting down in meetings, chasing people on the phones, making sure that everything's perfect, because it stems back to when he was 11, when he visited the passage with his mother, Princess Diana. And he said in his speech today that that really kind of spurred him on and inspired him to do a lot of work on this area, because he obviously is incredibly privileged, and he points out the fact that he is incredibly privileged, but he's using his fame, essentially, to shine a light on this issue. And you just see it on the front pages of the Telegraph today, and the fact we're talking about it now. I think many people would argue if it was a politician talking about this, it wouldn't get quite as much coverage.
Well, also, possibly, a lot less would be done, because it would be overly politicised, etc. Whereas I was always told, don't start a campaign you don't already know you're going to win. So it would figure to me anyway that Prince William has got a very good idea that he is going to do this. He is actually got a proper game plan. Some people are saying, it's the usual trope, isn't it? Well, if we turned Buckingham Palace into a homelessness shelter, we could put 100 people in there. Well, all right, OK. I mean, he's not necessarily going to throw the doors of Kensington Palace open or whatever, but he has got land, hasn't he? And there is talk of him genuinely using some of his own land.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 300,000 people in the UK who are currently experiencing some form of homelessness, whether that's sleeping rough on the streets or sofa surfing or something like that. There are not 300,000 rooms in Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, etc. But you're right, he does have 135,000 acres of Duchy of Cornwall land at his disposal. I've spoken to his spokesperson at Kensington Palace, and they've essentially said that they are looking at ways to create social housing on Duchy land. This is Prince William and his team. But at the moment, they're not releasing any further details. I suspect the reason for that is it's in very, very early days.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see on that. But for now, the focus is very much on Homewards and his 5-year project here.
Yeah, exactly. So it is a 5-year plan to essentially end homelessness. It could just solve so many other issues as well, because they're trying to use, I believe, a model that was started in Finland, which basically said, look, unfortunately, a lot of people who are homeless also have other needs, say addiction, for example. Not everyone, but some people have addiction issues. And actually, by giving them a home to begin with, that's a starting place to then go and cure a lot of their other problems. I mean, if you say to a heroin addict, oh, look, we're going to give you some support with your addiction here, and even if you get them to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting or into rehab, then you release them back out onto the street in winter, I mean, go figure, you're going to end up probably taking something again. So this is looking at solving a multitude of issues, isn't it?
Yeah, so Finland is the only country in the European Union at the moment where homelessness is actually going down, the rate of homelessness. And that is because, as you say, this housing first policy they've got, where essentially they house people first, regardless of whatever mental health or addiction issues they have, and then they sort out the mental health and addiction issues afterwards. So that Prince William has praised that issue to some extent in his speech, but clearly he's future king. He cannot get involved in political issues, and it is a very fine line for him to tread. Royal Aids insists that he is very much staying above politics and it's all above board, and his campaign is simply additive to what local governments and charities are already doing. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see in 5 years' time whether the proof's in the pudding.
I just think it's a tremendous thing. Look, Cameron, thank you very, very much. Cameron Walker there, our royal correspondent, just filling you in on the latest from Prince William. A fantastic initiative, and fingers crossed, actually, that would be his legacy, wouldn't it? Solving homelessness. So there we go. Now, OK, we are going to be returning to that story a little bit later on in the show. But now to something certainly a bit more personal for me, anyway. As many of you know, I am counting down to Wednesday, June the 28th, which is 2 days' time, when I will dance on stage with the Dream Boys, who say they are the most famous male strippers in the UK. I am doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind, and there is, unfortunately, an epidemic of male suicide at the moment. Every single day, 12 men take their own lives, and suicide kills more men under the age of 40 than cancer, road traffic accidents, and, in fact, anything else. It's the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40. Now, thank you to everybody who's been donating. So far, we have raised around £68,000. Here is the link. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. I am just 48 hours away from getting my kit off on stage, and I promised you that if you donated, I would get myself into decent shape. So it is time for me to reintroduce you to our old friend, Fat Trick Christys. Here is a picture of what I looked like when I started this push for donations. I weighed in at a fighting weight of 15 stone, 8 pounds. But the problem was, I then went on to put more weight on, as people will be able to see in a picture that we're going to bring you. Look at that trundling lard ball, built like a stuffed olive. Anyway, you guys kept donating. So it was only right for me to try to hold up my end of the bargain. So in the past few months, thanks to all of you for donating, I've got to do my bit. I have lost almost 4 stone. And this is a picture of me today in the changing room before the show. And yes, there he is. OK, you might notice that there is also another subtle difference there. I no longer have chest hair. And that is because I said, if you guys hit the 60k mark, I will wax my chest. I am a man of my word. Here's the proof. Do you do many men?
Yes.
Oh, OK.
Okay. Just to let me know, how is temperature?
Oh, it's hot. Nice. Good.
Yeah. Initially, you will feel hot.
Oh! You're as you do already. OK. Oh, wow.
Okay. Downside is always happening.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Right, OK, so there we go. I have done that. So thank you very much for everybody who donated. As I said a moment ago, I am doing this to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. I'm delighted to say that we have now got more than £68,000. Thank you to everyone who's given money so far. This money will go directly to helping to save people's lives. You can donate more at justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. And tomorrow morning, I am going to essentially a glorified warehouse in Essex, where I will be relearning my dance routine. I'll be performing 3 routines on stage on the 28th in Kent, in Bromley, one of which will be a solo. So I will be, learning my routine properly tomorrow before I take the stage. Thank you to everyone who's donated. Justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. Right. Okie dokie, here's what's coming up very, very shortly. Councillors in Lincolnshire are battling to stop 2,000 migrants being moved into a local RAF airbase. GB News will cover a council meeting this evening. I've been asking you whether or not you would protest if indeed there was going to be some such site in your area, and I think it's worth watching these sites very closely, like RAF Scampton, like Wethersfield, because you know what? If it's happening there and the local MP, a local cabinet minister, the local population and the local councillor can all be overruled by the Home Office, then why couldn't that happen where you're living? GB Views at GBnews.com. Get them coming in thick and fast. Patrick Christys on GB News. We, of course, very much are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. And would you protest an asylum seeker centre being opened in your backyard? Well, despite the fact that the Foreign Secretary, the local council, the local MPs and the local residents don't want them, apparently the Home Office is saying you must have thousands of young men who have arrived here illegally in this country in your local village. We're all over this. There's a local council meeting taking place and we are there. In other news, Putin, will he go nuclear based on what we've just seen in Russia? What now for Vlad? And also, what does it mean for us here in the UK? You just heard from a top guest in the last hour that apparently the EU are trying to use this situation to claw us back under their command. Shocking stuff. And yes, as well, I will be getting my kit off, won't I? On stage with the Dream... Oh, hello. On stage with the Dream Boys. Yes, I've lost about 4 stone in order to be able to do this. Thank you very much for everyone who's donated. JustGiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. And in just a sec, I will tell you what my massive debate this hour is on. You won't want to miss that. Was Winston Churchill a white supremacist? Yep. Me neither, but there we go. Apparently, Winston Churchill has been described as a white supremacist on St Paul's website for a long time. They've since removed it, but why on earth are we doing this? I've got a big debate. Was Churchill actually a white supremacist? GB Views and GBnews.com. But now it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Hello to you as well. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says it's too early to predict what will happen in Russia following an attempted coup by the Wagner Group. The Kremlin has posted the first video of President Putin since the mutiny, making a statement to young engineers, and it's not clear when or where it was recorded. The whereabouts of the Wagner Group leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is also unclear. He was last seen leaving the military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don on Saturday. Rishi Sunak says the West is watching developments closely.
I've spoken to the leader of the United States, but also France and Germany over the weekend. We're completely coordinated on our response to this. It's a situation that we've been monitoring for some time, the instability that would be caused by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And what we saw over this weekend is an example of that coming to the fore. It's obviously too early to predict with certainty what might happen as a result of this, but I'm in close touch with our allies and we're monitoring the situation closely.
Well, the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, told GB News Russians now view President Putin differently.
The Putin image in Russia is invulnerable leader is completely destroyed. The whole world understands who is the Putin, but now many people understand it in Russia. And with that situation, I think that the armed forces of Ukraine definitely use this opportunity to increase the efficiency and intensiveness of our counteroffensive and receive the certain results.
Well, in news here at home, a man in his 30s has died after being stabbed on a tram in Nottingham. The attack in Basford in the north of the city happened at around 11 o'clock this morning. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. An inquest has been told Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning and that there was no evidence she was harmed. The mother of 2 disappeared in January whilst out walking her dog along the River Wyre in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. A Home Office pathologist told the inquest she hadn't been drinking before her death. And other experts have also been giving evidence saying the river was just 4 degrees, that's almost freezing, and inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal. Police searching for a woman in Derbyshire have found a body at a lay-by near Chesterfield. Sarah Henshaw disappeared more than a week ago. She was last seen at her home in Ilkeston. Police say they believe the body, which was discovered on the A617, is that of the 31-year-old. Her family's been informed. And detectives have been granted more time to question a man who's been arrested on suspicion of murder. Tributes have been pouring in for a 25-year-old man who died after his hot air balloon crashed in Worcestershire. Peter Gregory was killed on Sunday after his balloon fell to the ground near the village of Ombersley. His family say Mr Gregory was a passionate balloonist and died doing what he loved most. His death is being investigated by the Air Accidents Investigation Branch. The boss of an organised crime group which smuggled hundreds of people in and out of the UK has been jailed for 10.5 years. Mohammed Mokhtar Hussain was arrested in May 2021 following a National Crime Agency investigation. He was behind a London-based group which used a network of lorry drivers to move people across the Channel. They included a number of fugitives fleeing the UK who were wanted for serious crimes, such as child abuse and even murder. The chief executive of Ofwat has written to South East Water requesting an urgent meeting because of its hosepipe ban. David Black said supplies are below what is expected and he's concerned about restrictions being brought in during the year's first hot spell of weather. South East Water introduced a ban for customers in Kent and Sussex after 6,000 properties experienced supply interruptions or had water supplies completely cut off 2 weeks ago. People breaching restrictions could face a fine of up to £1,000. The world's second largest cinema chain, Cineworld, has announced it'll file for administration in the UK. The move, set to take place next month, is part of a restructuring plan. Shareholders will be affected, but the company, which has more than 100 cinemas across the UK and Ireland, says their British venues will continue to operate as normal. And as you've been hearing, the Prince of Wales has launched an initiative aimed at ending homelessness. Prince William's 5-year project, called Homewards, aims to make rough sleeping a thing of the past. Initially focusing on 6 locations, local businesses will be asked to develop action plans with up to £500,000 of funding.
I'm pleased to stand here today at the start of our path to ending homelessness. Over the next 5 years, we have a unique opportunity to develop innovative new solutions and scale their tangible impact. This will inspire belief throughout the UK and beyond that homelessness can be ended for good.
Prince of Wales speaking earlier on today. You with GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Lots on, but as ever, I'm just going to start the hour by ranting about something. Now, would you protest about an asylum seeker centre being set up in your town? I would. I think it's an absolute liberty. On Friday, it emerged that RAF Wethersfield will be used to house 1,700 male asylum seekers. We have a farcical situation where this is in Foreign Secretary's constituency. He opposes it, the local council opposes it, local residents oppose it, and then the Home Office goes to court and wins. And today, there is a council meeting looking to overturn the decision to house another 2,000 or so at RAF Scampton, a seriously historic site that saw the Dam Busters Raiders and the Red Arrows stationed there. But who would have ever thought that our own Home Office would be deemed to have won by allowing a load of fighting-age males who quite possibly came to this country illegally to be housed at the taxpayers' expense in historic military sites? It will knock around 5% off house prices. Scampton was scheduled to undergo a massive renovation and be turned into a historical tourist site, bringing in loads of money to the local area. Well, that won't happen now, will it? It's interesting that the lefties are always against having one of these bases or asylum seeker hotels or barges in their area, and they just lie about it and say that they oppose it because it's inhumane on the migrants. These people have just walked across 2 continents, squatted in the Calais jungle for however long. They should be chuffed with the military base. The reality is that the lefties don't want undocumented young men rampaging through their town any more than the Conservatives. They realise the public don't want it either, but they just can't admit that. So they talk about asylum seekers' human rights. What about British citizens' human rights? What about the right to a safe living environment? The right not to have 1,700 young men from all across the world plonked on your doorstep? The Home Office has assured that the housing centre will be temporary. We all know it won't be temporary, don't we? It's time to use full-scale offshore processing. I don't understand why we can't get loads of cruise ships, put them in the middle of the Channel. These people should never set foot on British soil, in my view. We actively have the Home Office, the people who are supposed to protect our borders and keep us safe, actively enacting a policy that makes people less safe and, in my view, helps to create more mass illegal immigration. GB views at gbnews.com. Get them coming in thick and fast. Let's go now to GB News' reporter Jack Carson, who is going to be all over tonight's council meeting about this RAF Scampton. Now, Jack, what is going on where you are? Because we've done the Wethersfield stuff. 1,700 young men are going to be plonked in that area. The locals, the local council, local MPs, they're desperately trying to oppose this, aren't they? What's happening where you are?
Yeah, good afternoon, Patrick. So this is West Lindsey District Council. This is where it's a Lib Dem-controlled council. Of course, this is the council which Scampton comes under. Now, there's a motion this evening. The motion calls for a halt to the government's plans to turn RAF Scampton into a place where they can put and host asylum seekers. It also calls for Lincolnshire County Council to join this council in standing, quote, for evidence-based consultative decisions that align with the welfare and aspirations of the residents here. It's been put forward by Councillor Sebastian Haig, who says that this issue is more just a critique of a single issue. He says it's an indictment of an absence of common sense and empathy and leadership that this area, he says, is witnessing from the Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Now, we know the decision to host asylum seekers was announced by Robert Jenrick in the Commons back in March, saying that they would be provided with porta cabins somewhere on the base, that they would have the essential living needs met, but nothing more. And the camp itself is set to process around 5,000 people in its first year of operation, although they say it will only host 2,000 at a time. Now, it will be self-contained from the people that live on the base there, but there are, of course, concerns because the migrants will be free to come and go from their accommodation as they please. Now, as you were mentioning there was £300 million worth of regeneration that was going to go into RAF Scampton, decided in a plan by the West Lindsey District Council here and Scampton Holdings Limited. Now, while that base is being used as a place to host asylum seekers, that investment, that regeneration wouldn't be able to take place. That's where a lot of critique of this plan of the Home Office is coming from, particularly from locals here, as it would create thousands of jobs in the area. So Edward Lee, who is the MP for this area, has questioned in the Commons and questioned Robert Jenrick how the government was going to preserve the heritage of that site. As you mentioned, the heritage of the Dampusters, but also how it was going to protect the 1,000 people that already live on the site, as well as the local primary school. Now, the latest that we do have coming out of the site of RAF Scampton is that the West Lindsey District Council here and their planning committee will consider an application for listed building consent for the removal of Guy Gibson's dog grave from RAF Scampton. This application has been put in by the Royal Air Force themselves as a result of concerns regarding the safety of the grave in light of those Home Office plans. Now, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has said that the policy was in the national interest, but at sites like Scampton, that historical concerns in those heritage buildings would not be used.
Indeed. I mean, we can't overstate what an absolutely historic site that is, and that is something I think that will get people going even more. That the Dambuster's dog, which is buried at RAF Scampton, could essentially be dug up to make way for people who've just arrived across the channel, and £300 million worth of investment into that area will now not be happening. It's also worth noting that it's in Lincolnshire as well, which is also, of course, the home of Boston in Lincolnshire, which is the least well-integrated part of the United Kingdom, the place that voted to leave the European Union by a higher percentage than any other place in the country as well. Jack, thank you very much. Jack Carson there is going to be keeping you abreast of this situation as indeed it develops. It's an absolute non-stop, unmitigated disaster, this. Harjap Singh Bangal joins me now, a UK immigration lawyer. Harjap, thank you very much. When it comes to people's human rights in this situation, we have local residents saying that their human rights to, well, frankly, not have 5% knocked off the price of their house. Not sure that's a God-given human right, but it'd be nice if it didn't happen, wouldn't it? Then also people rampaging freely through their town who may be absconding, maybe not absconding, public safety, health and concerns, and their right to historical and cultural enjoyment has all been shattered now against the wills of a cabinet minister, another cabinet minister, the local council, the local MPs and the local residents, because there's nothing more that we can do than plonk a load of people, apparently, in a historic military base. Are we prioritising the human rights of people who've just got to this country over the rights of people who have already been here a while?
I don't think it's an issue really of human rights. I think it's just an issue of the system's broken and the government don't know how to best to deal with this thing. I think we've missed the other announcement, and that is that Lincolnshire Police have been given £1.8 million specifically in their budget. Today it's been announced to deal with the camp at Scampton. So, you know, there will be more policemen about, there will be more extra budget. I don't think that there'll be 2,000 people just running through the streets. I think they'll be probably well policed, but surely it would be better if we spent that 1.8 million and gave it to the Home Office and said, well, just decide these claims quicker.
Yeah.
Why do these people have to be here for months or years? I mean, that's where the system is failing. It's almost an acceptance from the Home Office to say, do you know what, we're not going to be able to deal with this quickly, so we're going to plonk camps all around the country and we're going to keep these people here because we can't deal with the claims being processed quickly. And that in itself is just an admittance of failure. Right. And if no one can sort this system out, then it's not working.
How difficult is it to decide an asylum claim? OK, if you've come across the channel and you have no documentation and then we get some kind of language expert who can dictate that you have come from some kind of safe country, I mean, how long can it take? Because supposedly in some cases they're solving about 5 cases a week, and for all of this money, the hotel cost could top £11 billion next year at this rate. That is an astonishing figure. £11 billion for hotel costs next year. Oh, how much does it cost to employ people?
If you have all the information in front of you, if you have all the information in front of you, it should take about a day for one person to decide a claim. Before, in the year 2002, 2003, all the way up to about 2010 and 11, we used to have a fast-track system at places like Oakington, in Cambridge, and in Harmonsborough, and we used to decide the claims in about 7 to 9 days. So people used to come in on a Saturday, the interview would be on a Monday, on Wednesday they'd get served with a decision. We even had a court in the Harmonsworth Detention Centre, so the person didn't have to go out of court. If they appealed, the decision would, you'd have a hearing in the next few days in front of a judge, would make a decision, and in about 15 days, the whole case from A to finish would be decided, including the appeal. So that was there, and in this government's wisdom, they've stopped the fast-track system. It just doesn't work. It found out that it doesn't work for them. I don't know why. You'd have to ask a government minister that. Yeah. I haven't got an answer for the last 13 years. I'm sure you probably won't for the next 13. But the fact is, we had a system that worked and allowed us to send 60,000 people back a year.
Yeah, but what's that the problem?
Now we have a system that we can send.
But what's that the problem? Did people get hold of it and go, oh gosh, this is a bit mean to people's human rights, we're sending too many people back, and so we've changed laws and we've changed rules and we've changed regs. I mean, now with this illegal migration bill, there's talk of that being completely torpedoed, if indeed it gets off the ground. But it's being torpedoed by people who've got absolutely no alternative. The same group of people, may I say, who if they had a RAF base in their area or a migrant barge in their area would oppose it. They would oppose it. They'd lie about it and say, oh, we're doing this because of human rights grounds. The reality is they know that their local population wouldn't want them there either, so they just come up with another excuse not to have it. But, I mean, is the reason we're doing this now because what we used to be doing was deemed to be inhumane?
No, I think what it is, it's just the system's corroded over time and it's just become inept. There's been no investment. The staff are not well trained. You and me have discussed before that ex-supermarket staff are turned into Home Office staff and are put on thrown in the deep end and say decide is 50% of decisions that go in front of a judge are judged to be decided wrong. So that's why cases are taking time, because and generally the Home Office is just not working at anything it does, Patrick. What about the passports fiasco that we have every year when people want to go on holiday? Driving licenses backlog. Anything, the policing crisis, anything the Home Office touches, it breaks. That is not the sign of a healthy system. We need to invest in this system, get it up and running, so it works for us. At the moment, we're working for the Home Office. The Home Office isn't working for the people of this country. And it doesn't matter how many ministers have come and gone. Every minister has had this problem. This government does not have the solution to this.
This is the thing. There have been so many ministers that have come and gone through it all that you start to realise, well, maybe the problem isn't actually the ministers, it's just the people at the Home Office, really, because that must be the problem. Is there anything against immigration laws to buy 5 P&O ferries, put them in the Channel, and just never allow Channel migrants to set foot on British soil? Will that have any? Would that be illegal?
Patrick, we've seen in the past that doesn't deter people. Detention centres doesn't deter people. Small boats, people dying. We had 1,000 people die the other week on a boat. You know, and that doesn't deter people. It's the gangs. I'll tell you what will deter people. Something in your news story today, where somebody has been jailed for 10 years as a trafficker. Catching traffickers, jailing them for life and making an example of them will deter people. Just like it will deter drug dealers. Punishing drug users won't deter drug dealers. We know that. And punishing migrants will not deter people smugglers. It's the people smugglers that we need to catch.
But this is why I get so frustrated, because every single country around Europe, i.e. the continent of Europe, including us, appears to be saying that they care deeply about this issue, that they don't want it, that it's an annoyance for them, and that taxpayers are having to spend too much money. But it would just be cheaper if the full might of the special forces of all of those EU countries and us came together and smashed the human trafficking gangs, which we must be able to do, or at the very least be able to stop actual boats being transported across a continent and to the Channel. I find it literally unbelievable that we are incapable of doing that between us and all of our friends, which really does make me question whether or not they really want to stop it. But Harjap, thank you. I always enjoy our chats. Great stuff. Harjap Singh Bangal, UK
Patrick.
immigration lawyer. Loads more on this story on our website, gbnews.com, the fastest growing national news website in the country. Loads of big opinion, loads of analysis, and all the breaking news. Now, after the failed coup in Russia, I am asking today, is this the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin? Will they bump him off? How will that work? But crucially, what does all of this now mean for Britain? For people, very divisive issue this, by the way, very much a 50-50 split in the inbox about whether or not people are pro our support of Ukraine financially, militarily. Should it now be one last short, sharp, here's a load of weapons and money, lads, have at it, and try to see the Russians off? Or would you still be against that? I don't know. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my...
Paradoxically enough, that even Prigozhin case...
OK, we've just come off that break early because breaking news, James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, is in the House of Commons talking about the latest from Russia and Putin. Let's take it.
Through President Putin's case for war, saying, and I quote, "The war was needed for Shoigu to receive a hero star. The oligarch clan that rules Russia needed a war." He then went on to add, and I stress I quote him directly here, "The mentally ill scumbags decided it's okay, we'll throw in a few thousand more Russian men as cannon fodder. They'll die under artillery fire, but we'll get what we want." In the early hours of Saturday, Wagner forces entered the city of Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia, and Prigozhin announced that he would march on Moscow. This finally drew a response from Putin, who accused Prigozhin of an armed rebellion and promised tough action and punishment. Wagner troops promptly advanced more than 500 miles northwards towards Moscow before Prigozhin abruptly called off his operation and announced that Wagner would return to their bases. Having condemned him as a traitor in the morning, Putin pardoned Prigozhin in the afternoon, when a Kremlin spokesman announced that no charges would be brought. Mr. Speaker, the government, of course, considers this an internal Russian affair, and of course, the leadership of Russia is a matter exclusively for the Russian people. But everybody should note that one of Putin's protégés had publicly destroyed his case for the war in Ukraine. Prigozhin said on Friday there was nothing out of the ordinary before the 24th of February 2022. The situation was frozen with exchanges of military action and vicious looting by the Russians. He also said that Russia's defense ministry is trying to deceive both the president and the nation, that there was incredible aggression from the Ukrainian side with NATO support ready to attack Russia. The Russian government's lies have been exposed by one of President Putin's own henchmen. Now, the full story of this weekend's events and the long-term effects will take some time to become clear, and it is not helpful to speculate. Prigozhin's rebellion is an unprecedented challenge to President Putin's authority, and it is clear that cracks are emerging in the Russian support for the war. I, of course, hold no candle for Prigozhin or his forces. They have committed atrocities in Ukraine and elsewhere, but he has said out loud what we have believed since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, that this invasion was both unjustified and unprovoked. The events of this weekend are an unprecedented challenge to Putin's authority, with an armoured column approaching his own capital city. As the situation unfolded, the government monitored and responded to developments carefully. I was briefed on Friday evening and again regularly throughout the weekend by my officials. On Saturday, I chaired a COBRA meeting on the situation. We also have been in close contact with our allies. On Saturday, I spoke with Secretary Blinken and my other G7 colleagues, and I've also been in touch with other regional partners. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, spoke with President Biden, President Macron and Chancellor Scholz on Saturday afternoon. Mr. Speaker, despite these internal developments in Russia, Putin's bloody war in Ukraine continues. The Ukrainians fight for their survival, and our Ukrainian friends are mounting a determined counteroffensive and steadily clawing back their territory. We will not be distracted from our work to support Ukraine's self-defence and their subsequent recovery. This weekend's events show that it is Ukraine and its partners, not Russia, that have the strategic patience and resolve to prevail. At last week's Ukraine Recovery Conference, we sent a clear message that not only will we stand by our Ukrainian friends as they resist Putin's onslaught, but we will stand with them in the subsequent peace as well. Now that Russia's leadership cannot justify this war, even to each other, the only rightful course is for Putin to withdraw his troops and end this bloodshed now. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Senate Foreign Secretary David Lammy.
Okay, all right, so that was James Cleverly there, the Foreign Secretary, issuing his statement over the failed coup in Russia over the weekend and what this means for Vladimir Putin going forward. He was also saying, of course, that what the Wagner Group, the leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, said out loud was what we'd all thought he'd said behind the scenes, which is that the war was unjustified, etc., etc. And we'll bring you more details as we get it. But I am joined now by defence editor and chief foreign affairs columnist at The Telegraph. It's Con Coughlin. Con, thank you very much. I believe you were able to hear what James Cleverly had to say there. What do you make of it there?
Well, good afternoon. I thought it was a very measured statement, and it was reassuring to see the British government's really on top of events in Moscow. You know, we've had a COBRA meeting. We've had both the Prime Minister, Mr. Cleverly, talking to senior world figures and just making sure everybody's on the same page. Because, you know, whatever we think about Putin, whatever we think about this madman Prigozhin, Russia is the world's biggest nuclear power. And, you know, what terrified me over the weekend was the prospect of Prigozhin, a criminal by any other standard, suddenly managing to get control of the nuclear codes. I mean, that's Dr.
Well, that's fair enough, Com. Yeah.
So,
can I just ask on that?
It's good to see the government is functioning on this issue.
Yeah. Can I just ask on that? Because that was actually one of the big discussions that me and my friends, and I think a lot of people, were having over the weekend, which was, what does this mean for nuclear war? Because that's always the risk with Russia, isn't it? So, OK, all right, it's good that this Wagner chief hasn't got the nuclear codes, but what if Vladimir Putin thinks, I am literally about to be toppled at the moment, internally, through some reason? Is there any chance that this will make Putin more likely to go nuclear?
Well, the reassuring thing, Patrick, is that, as in this country, as in America, it's not one person with their finger on the button. There is a whole structure in place for authorizing nuclear strikes. And these structures were set up during the Cold War to prevent nuclear Armageddon. And the Russian military, people like Gerasimov, were brought up on this Cold War doctrine. So the idea that Putin or Prigozhin could wander into the Kremlin and press a button is not sustainable. But the problem with the Prigozhin thing was that if he succeeded in his coup, then you have genuine anarchy, and all the checks and balances that have been in place for decades would disappear. So that is why I think we were very worried over the weekend. And it's a great relief that Prigozhin and his silly mutiny have failed. But it does raise questions about the nature of leadership in Moscow, and if Putin goes, who replaces him?
Yeah, exactly. And Con, there is, in your view, I'm assuming, no chance whatsoever that this is part of some quite large ruse to come up with a way of moving Wagner forces to another border of Ukraine and making it seem like chaos. As far as you're concerned, this is pretty straightforward, that the leader of this mercenary force had had enough, marched on Moscow for a bit until, reportedly anyway, Putin's henchmen said, well, we'll just kill your relatives, and then he stopped doing that. You think it is at face value, this?
Yeah, and I think you can turn it around and say the Russian military has had enough of the Wagner group, because, if you look at what Prigozhin's been saying since the spring, he's been threatening a new Russian revolution, 1970 style, and that the head of the army, the defense minister, will all be strung up from lampposts in Red Square. I mean, it's all got very incendiary, which is why an edict was given at the start of this month for Wagner to be assimilated into the Russian military structure. Right. That's what Prigozhin was rebelling against, that he doesn't want to be part of the Russian military. But this is all Putin's fault. Wagner was set up as his own private army to do his dirty work because he couldn't rely on the professional Russian military to go and do the things he wanted to do, whether it's in North Africa, Crimea, or anywhere else. So this is Putin's problem. But as I said, the background to this is the Russian military just got sick and tired of Wagner.
OK. All right, Con, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Con Coughlin there, the defence editor and chief foreign affairs columnist at The Telegraph. The noises are that, I know that we've heard this a few times, but the noises are that, well, if we just give Ukraine one more big final push, more munitions, we continue to try and hound the Americans into doing the same as some of our European friends and allies as well, this could maybe be a turning point in the war. But maybe this time, that is true. GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, between now and 5 o'clock, we will discuss this extraordinary claim from St Paul's Cathedral that Winston Churchill was a white supremacist. We're going to have a big debate on that, and I will ask, why are the BBC letting left-wing comedian Ben Elton call Rishi Sunak a narcissistic sociopath? But first, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The head of the Wagner mercenary group that launched an attempted coup in Russia says he didn't want to overthrow the government. Speaking for the very first time since the group's march, Yevgeny Prigozhin says The march showed serious security problems in the country. In an audio message released on his Telegram account, the mercenary group leader added that his troops turned around to avoid spilling the blood of Russian soldiers. President Putin didn't mention the mutiny when he was speaking to young engineers earlier today.
I've spoken to the leader of the United States, but also France and Germany over the weekend. We're completely coordinated on our response to this. It's a situation that we've been monitoring for some time, the instability that would be caused by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And what we saw over this weekend is an example of that coming to the fore. It's obviously too early to predict with certainty what might happen as a result of this, but I'm in close touch with our allies and we're monitoring the situation closely.
In other news today, a man in his 30s has died after being stabbed on a tram in Nottingham. The attack in Basford in the north of the city happened at around 11 o'clock this morning. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. And an inquest has been told today that Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning, and there was no evidence she was harmed. The mother of two disappeared in January while she was out walking her dog along the River Wye in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. A Home Office pathologist told the inquest she hadn't been drinking before her death. Other experts also gave evidence saying the river was just 4 degrees, almost freezing, and that inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal. Those are the headlines. More on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
During the Blitz, St Paul's Cathedral somehow survived intact. The dome became a symbol of British resistance to the German bombers. But it's emerged that the cathedral's website, until just last week, described the Prime Minister, during the war, Winston Churchill, as an unashamed imperialist and white supremacist. Right, that's nice of them, isn't it? On Friday, the post was altered. It now describes the man many believe our greatest ever leader as a figure of controversy, especially when viewed from a modern perspective. I mean, what do you have to do for a country to not fall victim to the woke mob? Joining me now is author and historian of the British Empire, Dr. Zarir Masani, and actor, writer and filmmaker Femi Nylander. Both of you, thank you very much. Dr. Zarir, I'll start with you. Was Winston Churchill a white supremacist?
Winston Churchill was a product of his time. He was born in Victorian times when most people around the world were racist in one form or another. Most Indians were racist about people darker skinned down south. Africans were racist about color. The Chinese regarded the rest of the world as barbarians. So Churchill grew up certainly with a conviction that the English nation and the English as a race were the best and the most superior in the world. Now, that he didn't, on that basis, discriminate against anyone. He committed no racial atrocities. He did not support the eugenics movements of his time. And he was very proud of the fact that, you know, India's population under the British expanded from 150,000 in 1750 to 425 million in 157 million in 1750 to 425 million in 1947. And he used to compare this with the Americans having wiped out their native population. So he was very proud.
I'll come back to you. I will come back to you. I think the phrase "a man of his time" might be quite appropriate to kind of quite neatly summarise what you were saying there. Femi, I'll throw it over to you. Look, when it comes to white supremacy, I mean, he did defeat the Nazis, who are like the ultimate white supremacy, aren't they? So, you know, is it fair to describe him as that and basically only that on St Paul's website?
Well, I don't think it's correct to say that he didn't discriminate based on his beliefs in British superiority. If you look at Churchill, he said the Indians are a ghastly people with a ghastly religion. He said that the famine, which he was involved in, he was actively, as the leader of the UK, exporting food from India whilst there was a famine in Bengal in order to feed British troops. He said that it was their own fault for breeding like rabbits. He boasted about shooting 3 savages in the Sudan in his youth. He said that Palestinians only eat camel dung. He was definitely an imperialist, and he was definitely a product of his time. And he gave amazing speeches which talked about democracy and freedom, etc. But he didn't believe that this freedom should expand to the darker-skinned peoples of the world. He resided over the empire. He believed in the empire, there's a reason that Barack Obama, for example, when he took office, removed the bust of Churchill from the White House, because Churchill's government was directly responsible for the torture of Barack Obama's grandfather when he was fighting against the British in the Kenyan Mau Mau resistance. The reality is that, yes, Churchill should be remembered as someone who assisted in defeating the Nazis, as did the Russians, who you've just been speaking about. Yeah. But he should also be remembered as someone who held very, very, very dubious views about race, which informed his policies.
Okay, well, that's actually a really good point to lob it back over, actually, because, now hear me out on this, all right, is there an argument to say, and I'll throw this to you, Dr. Zarir, first, that if Churchill hadn't had those kind of ideas and policies at that specific moment in historical time, then we might not have won the war?
Absolutely, because he stood up to Nazi Germany at a time when Britain and its empire stood alone. The Russians were in alliance with the Germans. The French had surrendered. And Churchill had the determination and the conviction that the British might come through it after Dunkirk, when things looked pretty grim. So for a couple of years, Churchill, stood alone virtually against the Nazis. Now, I mean, the kind of things you've just heard about Churchill is a conflation of things he said at different times in different contexts, things he never said which are attributed to him, and your other guest is just sort of spewing the kind of poison that is being poured into our schools today.
Did he say that or not, in your view? Did he say those things that Femi has just said?
All of the quotes are available on an article from The Independent called "The Dark Side of Winston Churchill." Just Google it. The Dark Side of Winston Churchill.
I was asked the question. He said that Indians had a beastly religion in relation to being very angry with Gandhi for launching the Quit India movement at a time when the British were fighting with their backs to the war. He also was full of praise for the bravery of the Indian army, Muslims and Hindus. So Churchill,
but you made a good point.
At different times.
Right, I'm going to cut in because you make a good point there. Now, Femi, now Gandhi was an interesting chap, to say the least. Wrote essentially love letters about Mussolini, who I think it's fair to say genuinely was an actual white supremacist. And Gandhi, as has been widely reported, was rumoured to have enjoyed a relationship with some very, very young ladies, OK? Whereas when we see Gandhi's statue or anything relating to Gandhi, you don't tend to see, white oppressive sympathiser or indeed another word potentially beginning with P there, do you? You just see Gandhi, cultural hero. Why is it the same? Why is it not the same for Winston Churchill?
Well, no, that's not exactly true. There was actually a movement in a Ghanaian university which asked for removal of the statue of Gandhi because he believed that Africans were inferior. Yep, and because he believed so that of course. I'm just saying that's. But okay, over here, as I say, you've just said people are being miseducated in schools. All the quotes I've given today, you can find in an article in The Independent called "The Dark Side of Winston Churchill." But another quote he gave: Gandhi should be bound hands and foot and put before the gates of Delhi and trampled on by a giant elephant whilst the new viceroy, i.e. the new person that Britain has appointed to rule India, sits on its back. That shows his attitude to Gandhi. And yes, Gandhi was a person that was flawed. Just let me finish, please. Let me finish and you can respond. Let me finish and you can respond. Gandhi was a person who was flawed in his own right, in many ways, and I'm not here to advocate for Gandhi, but the reason that Churchill disliked Gandhi is because Gandhi wanted India to be independent, and India was very valuable to the British Empire, which is, as you say, a large part of the reason we won the war. It's not just Churchill, it's the thousands of people from across the empire that were compelled to work for a country that was colonizing them. And that's what won the war. The Indians, the people from across the empire.
You're hearing a lot of completely invented quotes. The last quote about Gandhi being trampled outside the gates of Delhi is completely fictional. Churchill never said it. No one ever said it about Gandhi. So you're really inventing stuff, which is why we're getting an institution like St. Paul's putting up the kind of nonsense they did. And they've had to take it down and correct it and say, well, to say Churchill is controversial, which maybe he is, if you're hearing what you're hearing. But I think this complete invention of quotes, he said X, Y, and Z. He never said half those things.
OK, now, Femi, when you look at someone like Nelson Mandela, undoubtedly a great figure from history, there can be no denying that. However, Mandela obviously was a part of the ANC. They weren't shy about setting off car bombs in public, and innocent people died as a result of that. So when you see someone like Nelson Mandela, the argument about why he is just exclusively celebrated tends to be because he was overcoming and fighting against oppression. Whereas with Churchill, they ignore that bit out. They just go, well, you know, they conveniently forget that he was fighting against the Nazis and that the world was on an absolute knife edge, don't they? Why is it that it only appears to be white people who are getting cancelled or getting hounded in this way?
Well, you have the situation entirely in reverse. We don't ignore that. We constantly, all of our media, all of our stories at school, we learn how Churchill drove the UK and won the war against the Germans, and we never learn about the things in the Mau Mau, about the concentration camps in South Africa, about the Bengal famine, all of the dark sides of his legacy. And all these quotes, just Google the quotes, go back to YouTube, word for word, listen to what I say, Google them, and you'll find the sources. So it's nonsense to say they're invented.
Femi, I get it, because I've read the quotes as well. I admit I haven't gone into a British library and looked them up myself exactly. I've probably read the same articles as you. But Femi, can you just answer me finally, why is it that the likes of Nelson Mandela, to a large part people like Gandhi as well, when you look at them, they are taught as exclusively positive people, whereas right now in this country you have to describe Churchill as some kind of imperialist white supremacist? Well, why is that? Is that just because he's white? What is it?
No, again, they're not taught just as great people, for one. And Churchill, as I say, is seen as one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century across large swathes of the world. So it's nonsense to say that he's only seen as a white supremacist. Okay. The reason that there's a difference is ANC, they were actually fighting against oppressors from a position.
So was it Hitler? He was fighting against Hitler.
No. Churchill, the UK and Germany were not. There was not like a huge power imbalance between them. These were two modern European powers at war, and yes, they were fighting against Hitler, and Hitler had a horrific Nazi ideology. But at the same time, the UK declared itself the leader of half of the world and owned an empire which spread across huge swathes.
Let's be honest. To be fair, Femi, every other country was trying to.
You can't preach about freedom whilst owning a slave, and you can't preach about democracy whilst running an empire. It doesn't make sense.
Both of you, I'm getting shouted at. I've got to move on. I obviously could talk about this all show, but thank you very, very much, both of you. Much appreciated. Let's do it again sometime soon. Author and historian of the British Empire, Dr. Zarir Masani, actor, writer, filmmaker, Femi Nylander. Right, OK, so moving on. Ben Elton has been criticised for calling Rishi Sunak a narcissistic sociopath, but I want to know why the BBC, letting a well-known left-winger make such an outrageous claim and not challenging him. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In just a few minutes, we will hear live from Defence Secretary Ben Wallace as he reacts to that failed coup in Russia. But left-wing comedian Ben Elton has defended his appearance on the BBC yesterday when he called Rishi Sunak a narcissistic sociopath. Elton was a guest on BBC One's Sunday morning politics show when he criticised the Prime Minister.
I mean, if anybody was still watching after that extraordinary Orwellian, meaningless, evasive word salad, I mean, I sort of, everybody else wanted to believe, and I sort of believe maybe he's kind of a bit more decent, you know, and it turns out he's as much of a mendacious, narcissistic sociopath as his previous boss. The evasion, the constant repetition of a repaired street. I genuinely wanted to believe that maybe the Tories had made a reset, even though they had elected a man who had loyally served under Johnson, a man who made a mockery of a parliamentary democracy and clearly was venally motivated by self-interest.
Joining me now is broadcaster, author and legend Michael Crick. Michael, thank you very much. Should this kind of stuff be on our taxpayer-funded TV news service, do you think? Relatively unchallenged? Your thoughts?
Well, I've known Ben Elton since I was 12, or at least we knew each other quite well in those days for a few years. And he was always very left-wing, and we had quite a few arguments, although I sort of regard myself as on the left there then. And, you know, free speech and all that, he should say what he likes. His comments yesterday were way over the top. I mean, you might say Boris Johnson was mendacious and narcissistic, but I don't think you can say Rishi Sunak was. That's just ridiculous. He went far too far, did Ben Elton. But this is what happens when you mix politics with show business or comedy. And television and radio producers like doing that, and not just in the BBC, by the way. I mean, when I was on Channel 4 News, we were always interviewing Hollywood stars and then, then asking them about Trump. Yeah. But the problem is that you don't, that you don't challenge them in the same way, as you would if they were a political figure, or at least presenters tend not to. And the second thing is that people from show business and comedy backgrounds tend to be on the left, not always, of course, and GB News has found quite a few right-wing comedians for your airwaves, but it unbalances things. And the Laura Kuenssberg Sunday morning programme, they like to have showbiz people, celebrities, stars, bring a bit of dazzle and glitter to the show amidst all the boring politicians. But if they're being fair, really, they should challenge them properly. And certainly Ben Elton needed challenging with those remarks. I mean, he's right in saying that Rishi Sunak is evasive. But to say that Rishi Sunak is a sociopathic and mendacious and narcissistic was just ridiculous.
Yeah, those are actually pretty big claims to make about somebody as well. The kind of thing that you would hope would be challenged, based on it. Do you think the Beeb just doesn't get it? Do you think they try to add and do things differently? I mean, they had that boy Mizzy on, didn't they, as the voice of the youth? I mean, this is just some, kid from some kind of terrible background who breaks into people's houses and puts it on the internet.
Well, I don't know anything about him, but I think there are a lot of people in the BBC who are worried about this. And indeed, I bet there was an inquest inside the BBC this morning, knowing some of the more senior people there. I think they are worried that if you have show business people, celebs on, and you ask them political questions, they're likely to be left of centre in their views, and you should challenge them properly. And I think the Sunday morning programme with Laura Kuenssberg, I don't watch it much, but if they do this all the time, they've really got to be tough on them, because otherwise you're just giving a free hit to someone on the left who isn't a politician, someone who's widely respected by the public.
Yeah.
But I think people inside the BBC are a lot more conscious of this problem now than they were, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
All right, look, Michael, thank you very much. I'm sorry it was short and sweet, but I always enjoy our chats. We'll do it again soon. Michael Crook there, broadcaster, author and legend. Right, OK, loads still to come. Big night for the residents of Lincolnshire in the village of Scampton. They are fighting tooth and nail against the government plans to house 2,000 young migrant men at an old RAF airfield that was once used by the dam busters. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before
and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Now, local residents are fighting tooth and nail against the government plans to lob around 2,000 male asylum seekers in their backyard, a historical site of RAF Scampton. We are live at a local council meeting there. We'll bring you the very latest because, frankly, this could happen in your backyard as well. But we're also going to be going to Ben Wallace, our Defence Sec. He's going to be giving a statement in a matter of moments, actually, on the latest from Russia, what's going on with Putin, what does it mean for Ukraine, and what will it mean for us? Rumblings that maybe we're going to redouble our funding and efforts and armament efforts with Ukraine as well to try to see the Russians off. Would you be on board with that? Do you think the time to act is now? We're also going to be talking about this, of course, as well. Sad news, of course, but it is the Nicola Bulley inquest, so we'll be finding out, of course, about the cause of death, etc. We'll bring that to you as well. And the ridiculous, yes, a hosepipe ban. I mean, good grief. You apparently are going to be fined £1,000 in certain parts of the country if you use a hosepipe to water your geraniums. But I wanted to know, would you snitch on your neighbour if you saw them using a hosepipe? I certainly wouldn't, but you know what? People would, wouldn't they? And just one final one to round us off as well. It is less than 48 hours, yeah, there he is, until I get my kit off on stage with the Dream Boys. I've lost a bit of weight to be able to do it, but it's all down to your wonderful donations. So thank you very much, everybody. And this hour, I will be playing you the footage of me getting my chest waxed at the weekend because you lovely people managed to hit £60,000. We're now up to £69,000. JustGiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. It is all going to the mental health charity Mind. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right, get your views coming in. GBviews at gbnews.com. Would you fight plans for an asylum seeker detention centre in your area? And do you think now is the time to redouble our efforts, even though we're in a cost of living crisis, for Ukraine to try to see off the Russians? GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening. The top stories on GB News tonight. The head of the Wagner mercenary group that launched an attempted military coup in Russia at the weekend says he didn't want to overthrow the government. Speaking for the first time since the group's march, Yevgeny Prigozhin says the march showed serious security problems in the country. And in an audio message released on his Telegram account, the mercenary group leader added his troops turned around to avoid spilling the blood of Russian soldiers. President Putin didn't mention the mutiny when speaking to young engineers earlier today, but Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the rebellion has shown the world that Russia is not as strong as previously thought.
Prigozhin's rebellion is an unprecedented challenge to President Putin's authority, and it is clear that cracks are emerging in the Russian support for the war. I, of course, hold no candle for Prigozhin or his forces. They have committed atrocities in Ukraine and elsewhere, but he has said out loud what we have believed since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, that this invasion was both unjustified and unprovoked.
Well, the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, told GB News Russians now view President Putin differently.
The Putin image in Russia is invulnerable leader is completely destroyed. The whole world understands who is the Putin, but now many people understand it in Russia. And with that situation, I think that the armed forces of Ukraine definitely use this opportunity to increase the efficiency and intensiveness of our counteroffensive and receive the certain results.
Here, a man in his 30s has died after being stabbed on a tram in Nottingham. The attack in Basford, in the north of the city, happened at around 11 o'clock this morning. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. An inquest heard today how Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning, and there was no evidence she'd been harmed. The mother of two disappeared in January while she was out walking her dog along the River Wye in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. A Home Office pathologist told the inquest she hadn't been drinking before her death, and other experts explained, saying the river was just 4 degrees, almost freezing, and inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal for anyone. Police searching for a woman in Derbyshire have found a body at a lay-by near Chesterfield. Sarah Henshaw disappeared more than a week ago. She was last seen at her home in Ilkeston. Police say they believe the body, which was discovered in the lay-by on the A617, is that of the 31-year-old. Her family's been informed. Detectives have been granted more time to question a man who's been arrested on suspicion of murder. Police have confirmed that human remains found in Ballymena early this month were those of Chloe Mitchell. The 21-year-old went missing on the 3rd of June, sparking a search operation. 2 men have already been charged in relation with her murder. And tributes have been pouring in today for the 25-year-old man who died after his hot air balloon crashed in Worcestershire. Peter Gregory was killed on Sunday after his balloon fell to the ground near the village of Ombersley. His family say Mr Gregory was a passionate balloonist and died doing what he loved most. His death is being investigated by the Air Accidents Investigation Branch. The boss of an organised crime group which smuggled hundreds of people in and out of the UK has been jailed for 10.5 years. Mohammed Mokhtar Hussain was arrested in May 2021 following a National Crime Agency investigation. He was behind a London-based group which used a network of lorry drivers to move people across the Channel. They included a number of fugitives fleeing the UK who were wanted for serious crimes such as child abuse and murder. The world's second largest cinema chain, Cineworld, has announced it's going to file for administration in the UK. The move, set to take place next month, is part of a restructuring plan. Shareholders will be affected, but the company, which has more than 100 cinemas across the UK and Ireland, says their British venues will continue to operate as normal. And the Prince of Wales has launched an initiative aimed at ending homelessness. Prince William's 5-year project, called Homewards, aims to make rough sleeping a thing of the past. Initially focusing on 6 locations, local businesses will be asked to develop action plans with up to £500,000 in funding.
I'm pleased to stand here today at the start of our path to ending homelessness. Over the next 5 years, we have a unique opportunity to develop innovative new solutions and scale their tangible impact. This will inspire belief throughout the UK and beyond that homelessness can be ended for good.
Prince of Wales speaking earlier on today. That's it. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
In just a few moments, Secretary of State for Defence Ben Wallace is expected to give a keynote speech about the current situation in Russia following a failed coup attempt. We will be taking that, so make sure that you stay tuned in for that. But in the last half hour, the man who led the coup, Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, has released an audio message, and they are his first comments since the weekend.
Я открыл пресс-службу и получил 1000 вопросов по поводу произошедших событий. Для того, чтобы не было кривотолков.
Well, that obviously makes perfect sense. Vladimir Putin has also made his first public appearance since the rebellion in an address to the nation, but didn't mention the recent events that took place. And his defence minister, Sergei Shoigu, has been seen visiting troops in Ukraine after the Wagner leader demanded that he should be handed over to restore justice. But what do we know about the Wagner group led by Prigozhin? And, well, here we go. He was Putin's ex-ally, known as Putin's chef. He then formed the Wagner group during Russia's 2014 Crimea invasion. The group is responsible for killing thousands in Bakhmut. The leader then criticises Russian military leaders for a lack of ammunition. And then most recently, this Saturday morning, he heads for Moscow. By the evening, he then turns around and heads for Minsk. But I want to know, as I'm sure most people do really, is what all of this really means for Britain now. So former British Army officer Major General Tim Cross. In fact, we're going straight to Ben Wallace, our Secretary of State for Defence, who is talking now about Russia and Putin. Let's go.
And we will go for a dialogue, a discussion. And I can assure you it's not going to be just a discussion between the two of us, which will be very interesting, but probably just to us. I'll ask a few questions at the beginning, and then we will open it up to the audience. You will have plenty of opportunities to ask the Secretary of State. Secretary of State, can I just ask initially, the question is probably on our mind after the weekend. How do you evaluate what has happened in Russia over the last 48 hours or so? And what does it tell us about the war in Ukraine?
I think one of the most important parts of the last sort of 72 hours was Prigozhin's video, where he directly challenged the narrative for war that the Kremlin had put out, which was that Ukraine wasn't going to attack Russia, NATO wasn't going to attack Russia. And if there's a sort of lasting aftertaste of the events over the weekend, it's clearly that. That's important, that Russian people get to hear the truth, and that Prigozhin was able to do that. But I also think we shouldn't necessarily overcredit the sort of destabilization that somehow this is a massive derailment of the Kremlin. You know, what we see at the moment is Prigozhin's gone off to Belarus. The Wagner group is predominantly spent, done, dissipated, whichever you'd like to interpret it. And the war in Ukraine is still being prosecuted by the Russian General Staff. And as I sit here right now, General Gerasimov and Minister Shoigu are still doing their day job. And, you know, we shouldn't be that surprised. The Russian state has been designed like that for 300, 400 years to protect the Tsar. And there are questions you could look as an outside observer about, you know, why did the FSB seem to take its time, or was it slow, or missed opportunities? Who knows? But also what led Prigozhin to decide that he could do this. I think the only big change is that he could do it. You know, I think it exposed that Russia's reserves are threadbare. The fact he could advance, or his small band of men, and I think it was only about 2,500 people, made it so far up the motorway without much opposition, sort of showed that how stretched Russians' reserves are. But it mustn't distract from the main mission, which is to support Ukraine in throwing Russia out of their country and the offensive that's going on at the moment.
Indeed, and that was a point mentioned by CGS earlier today as well, that this is an internal debate in Russia about how to wage the war better in Ukraine. But does it not confirm what the Ukrainians have always said, that if we are steady in our purpose, it would be the Russian regime that will crumble?
Look, the CGS is right there on another thing, which is this is a Russian internal issue. It was clearly a matter for the Russian system and a matter for Russian generals and players of what happened over the weekend. I think the West overall looked at it with some surprise. And I think what we'd also probably say is that it was just another example of the cracks we have been seeing in public discourse, where an anger amongst generals, I mean, I can't remember how many generals have been fired or replaced in the last year and a plus by Russian leadership. If you remember early on, I think not a single one of the original sector or army commanders who started the invasion are still in place. I think they were all fired over this period. And then, of course, any army who suffers nearly 300,000 dead or casualties or desertions cannot expect to get away with reputational damage and indeed friction amongst its leadership about why and how, who's telling the truth, who's not. And Prigozhin just articulated that as a free agent, as he probably saw it. So I think what we should really...
OK, all right, so that's our Secretary of Defence there, Ben Wallace, who is making a speech in Westminster following that failed coup. I'm joined now by former British Army officer Major General Tim Cross. Look, thank you very much for hanging around, Tim. Nothing ideal for you, I do understand. Nothing that much new there, to be honest with you, or particularly exhilarating from Ben Wallace. A little bit of a letdown. However, what he was saying is that it has exposed how weak maybe Putin is. I want to know, how does all of this affect the UK? Are we now going to pump a load more resources into Ukraine to try to see the Russians off? What's going on?
OK, let me start with a couple of things. First of all, I think the irony of this, of course, is that the boss of the Wagner Group is right in much of what he's been saying. Basically, what he's been doing is criticising the Russians for the invasion, how they're conducting it, the failure of the senior leadership, and so on. And what he's exposed is, that underlying problem. And what is happening here now is it's a further development in something I've talked a little bit before when we talk about fighting power, what delivers victory on a battlefield. And ultimately that relies on a moral component of fighting power. It relies on leadership. It relies on friendship and trust and integrity and honor. People die for their mates and their friends, and they need to be confident about the leadership that is leading them in that campaign. And what we're seeing here is this whole Russian moral component continuing to fall apart, really, and it will reinforce the Ukrainian moral component, who they've been doing a brilliant job, obviously, in defensive operations, and as we're beginning to see in this a counteroffensive that's going on, although that's, has to be said, is relatively slow at the moment. Now, what does it mean for us in the UK? Well, two things. One is we need to be very careful about to see what's happening in Russia. I happen to believe Ben Wallace is a very good defence secretary. And the MOD will be watching what's going on there very closely, because these dictatorships can collapse quite quickly. And the issue is what follows them. Who is likely to replace him? I don't actually think Putin is going to disappear, in the next week or two. But this is a continuing undermining of his position. And it is not beyond the bounds of possibility that he could collapse. So we need to watch what's going on inside Russia. What is the potential, particularly, of course, because of the whole nuclear issue, the number of weapons they hold and so on. And then secondly, for Ukraine, answering your question directly, yes, of course we need to continue to support them. But do I think the UK is about to put in huge more quantities of equipment? No, I don't, frankly, because I don't think we've got them. And we're running short of quite a lot of this stuff ourselves. We need to raise our own defence spending in order to be able to continue to help Ukraine.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, there's two big issues at play there when it comes to one more push for Ukraine, which is our own military capabilities and resources. It is also, to be fair as well, just the cost of living crisis over here at the moment. And whilst I think people don't want to see some big Russian wave across Europe, at the same time as the Wagner troops being able to march on Moscow, I can't help but feel as though it does slightly undermine the idea that if Vladimir Putin was able to take Ukraine, that he would then not stop and be able to take Europe as well, which I would argue does slightly undermine the idea that we have to spend billions of pounds in a cost of living crisis, giving the Ukrainians absolutely everything that they want, whilst Marjorie from number 42 gets evicted because she can't pay her mortgage. But there we go. Is it better for Britain to have Putin in power? In which case, do we not finish this war anytime soon? We just keep it locked in some kind of stalemate? Because is it better the devil you know?
Well, you've raised a number of issues there, and I was just about to say, of course, a lot of people will say better the devil you know, and there's some truth in that. But what we saw, for example, in Germany during World War II is Hitler sacking all of his generals on a regular basis. And Putin has been doing that. Ben Wallace referred to that. And I think that will continue. And therefore, we need to prepare for the fact that he may not be in power for much longer. Ultimately, I suppose I would come down on the side of the fence that says keep him in power because we do understand who he is. He's a complete nightmare, but nonetheless, we understand that. And the danger is he would be replaced by somebody even more, more unhelpful, to put it politely. Now, as far as the UK is concerned, I've never argued, and I've certainly never said, we're not about to see Russia move into Western Europe, even less drive down Whitehall. So in terms of your comment about defence spending, yes, of course, there's an argument to say that what's going on here is Ukraine is fighting a proxy war on our behalf, and therefore we should continue to sustain it with weapons and materiel and intelligence and all sorts of other things. And there's truth in that. But the bottom line is we have given them a lot of stuff, and we are running short of our own. Yeah. So we need to be prepared for the fact that there could be a change in Russia. There could be a more aggressive stance in Russia than is the case.
That's all right. Is it the KGB? They're coming after you.
Yeah, quite. They could then have a more, vitriolic campaign. They could decide to move into the Baltic states. They could decide to do all sorts of stuff. So we have to be prepared for the fact that we might find ourselves engaged in further conflict. And I'm not suggesting we spend billions more on defence, but I am suggesting that we need to analyse carefully how we would do that, how we would engage, and we certainly need to be in a better position, or a stronger position, to continue to support Iraq. To continue to support Ukraine.
It's all right, don't worry. Hopefully history doesn't repeat itself there. Look, thank you very, very much, Major General Tim Cross. Always an absolute pleasure. Take care. I'll chat to you soon. That's, of course, the former British Army officer, Major General Tim Cross. Right, OK, loads more on this on our website, gbnews.com, fastest growing national news site in the country. Loads of analysis, big opinion. You all know it by now. And, of course, the big breaking news. But when I come back, it's getting to what's affectionately known as squeaky bum time for the people of Lincolnshire, because local councillors in Lincolnshire are challenging government plans to house 3,000 male migrants at an airbase used by the dam busters. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Okay, so welcome back. Now, in just a few minutes, I'll attack a big moral dilemma. Would you snitch on your neighbour if they broke a hosepipe ban? No, in my view, but there we go. And if watching me in agony is your idea of fun, then I've got a treat for you. But much closer to home, much more important. On Friday, I broke the news that the prospect of 1,700 male migrants being moved into a disused airfield in Essex was a step closer. This evening, attention turns to Lincolnshire, where the RAF airbase used by the dam busters could soon house 2,000 male asylum seekers. Scampton is a possible alternative to placing migrants in expensive hotels, despite the fact, of course, that it was due for a £30 million renovation in the area, and that now will be cancelled. And the hotel bills could well top £11 billion for next year anyway. But a motion from a Liberal Democrat councillor is calling for a halt to the government's plans. Let's speak to Sarah Carter, who's part of Save Our Scampton campaign. Sarah, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Is this kind of last chance saloon? Because I was hearing that you're also trying to launch legal bids as well. I mean, the Home Office recently, quote unquote, won one with Wethersfield, didn't they? So what's going on for you about this then?
Well, can I just correct you first? It's actually a 300 million regeneration plan, not a 30 million. So,
yes,
yeah, no, that's fine. It's a big difference. But, yeah, I mean, West Lindsey District Council are obviously waiting to find out about the judicial review. And we're hoping that today it's just going to sort of help bring everyone together and make sure that everyone's working from the same page. As myself and a few other residents that have come just to be able to sort of interact and show obviously we've got a big interest in this, and we want to be sort of considered and take part in these decisions.
OK, all right. So why are you so opposed to having this site used to house around 2,000 young men?
I think I just mentioned 300 million reasons.
Right, yeah.
£300 million regeneration for one of the poorest counties in the country. You know, it's what it would mean to our county, our local area, to have this regeneration, to have jobs which we were promised with levelling up, which, you know, that's not happening. You're taking away a £300 million deal that's on the table to be able to use the site for a couple of years and then leave it to the residents afterwards for it to just become a derelict former RAF base like many around the county.
OK, all right. Now, one of the things that's difficult for me to understand is that in another case in Wethersfield there, the Foreign Secretary is dead against it. Local MPs are dead against what you're doing here. The local councillors, local residents are as well. Even people just right across the nation, because Scampton is such a historical site. And yet you're being fought by our actual Home Office, whose job it is, I think, is it not, to control our borders and protect people. And they are adamant that you just have to suck it up and have this on your doorstep. Does that not feel a bit weird?
Well, I mean, we haven't actually had any consultation yet from the Home Office, so we're just having to go on sort of what we hear from others. It would be nice if they had actually sort of told us their plans, and so we could tell them that what we think of them, but we're definitely not just going to suck it up and let them sort of go ahead with it. We're going to give a good as fight as we can give.
OK, all right, and what is the ultimate end goal for you here? Look, I've got to be honest with you, it's not looking good, is it, with respect? Because the Home Office just kind of keeps winning at the moment. They are claiming that it's an emergency. The court appears to be quite keen on allowing them to claim that kind of stuff. So, I mean, this could end with you essentially, what, chaining yourself to the gates at Scampton? Is that the end game here?
Did you remember that from the last interview? Sorry. Well, yeah, I mean, the residents are passionate, and the fact that like I say, we haven't had any consultation whatsoever. We've just been left in the dark, so we don't know what to expect. We don't know, how we're actually going to be catered for with having to have these extra 2,000 people living right on our doorstep, and, it's like, what do they expect us to do?
Well, yeah, and also, have you had any assurances as to whether or not these people are going to be essentially free range, so they can go out and about, or are they going to be contained?
No, it's accommodation. It's not a detention centre. It's just accommodation, right. So they're free to come and go as they please. There's no restrictions on that at all. But no, again, we haven't had any consultation. We have had no notification as an estate of what is planned for, our home. Basically, it's just been what we've had from the media and the council, what they're able to find out and feed to us. We are completely in the dark, and we've just been left to find out information for ourselves. Why in 3 months, why they couldn't actually meet with us and have this discussion, because it would possibly help, relax people a little bit with their fears. But no, there's been nothing. So,
Sarah, can I ask you a slightly kind of personal-ish question, if that's all right, which is like, you've just said there, this is your home. You've obviously got, it sounds like a real love for where you live and potentially where you were brought up as well as it. Could you just explain how you will actually feel when or if this happens? Because they say it's temporary, but I'm sure that you share my suspicion that this is not going to be that temporary. I mean, why is it so upsetting for you?
OK, I've only lived there for 8.5 years. My husband has been there for 28 years. He was in former military accommodation on the site, and then when they started selling off the houses, he bought a house on the site because he wanted to stay there 16 years ago. So he's a homeowner. Well, we're homeowners there, along with many other people that have chosen to live there. I mean, up until March, we had the red arrows fly in, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. So anyone that's got sort of a love of the red arrows or the history, it is the ideal place to come and live. The home of the dam busters, well, the most iconic raid in sort of war history, and you just can't ignore that.
No, and I mean, there is even talk of digging up the grave of a dog of one of the dam busters heroes and moving that somewhere to make. Well, I mean, it's just it is shocking. Go on, Sarah, very, very quickly on that. I can just tell that that's upset you a bit.
Well, it was the day of the dam busters raid. It was Guy Gibson's dog was sadly knocked over in a hit and run right outside camp, and Guy Gibson asked if the dog could be buried outside his office at midnight when the raid was actually taking place, and it actually gives me goosebumps just saying that. But it is an iconic. Everybody knows about the dog. Everybody that has an interest needs to sort of sign the petition that's up at the moment to stop it getting moved. But also we've got a meeting next Wednesday as well, the planning meeting with the council, so anyone that sort of has an objection to it being moved is more than welcome to come along to the meeting. So
OK, Sarah, look, thank you very much for your time as ever, and good luck. Sarah Carter there, who's part of the Save Our Scampton campaign. Now loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock as South East Water brings in a ridiculous hosepipe ban. I will ask if you should grass on your neighbour if you see them breaking the law. It's £1,000 apparently. And I've got a real treat for you, lucky people. You're going Yeah, I don't write this. You're going to see me topless. I hope it doesn't put you off your tea. Crucially, as well, you're also going to see me having my chest waxed, which I can recommend is good viewing for people who both love me and indeed hate me. Now, those are your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The head of the Wagner mercenary group that launched an attempted military coup in Russia at the weekend says he didn't want to overthrow the government. Speaking for the first time since the group's march to Moscow, Yevgeny Prigozhin said the march showed serious security problems in the country. In an audio message released on his Telegram account, the mercenary group leader added that his troops turned around to avoid spilling the blood of young Russian soldiers. President Putin didn't mention the mutiny when he was speaking to young engineers earlier on today. But here the Foreign Secretary James cleverly says the rebellion has shown the world that Russia isn't as strong as previously thought.
Prigozhin's rebellion is an unprecedented challenge to President Putin's authority, and it is clear that cracks are emerging in the Russian support for the war. I, of course, hold no candle for Prigozhin or his forces. They have committed atrocities in Ukraine and elsewhere. But he has said out loud what we have believed since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, that this invasion was both unjustified and unprovoked.
Well, in other news today, a man in his 30s has died after being stabbed on a tram in Nottingham. The attack in Basford, in the north of the city, happened at around 11 o'clock this morning. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. An inquest was told today that Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning, and there was no evidence she'd been harmed. The mother of two disappeared in January while she was out walking her dog along the River Wyre in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. A Home Office pathologist told the inquest she hadn't been drinking before her death. Other experts also gave evidence saying the river was just 4 degrees, that's almost freezing, and inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal. More on all those stories, head to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Today's markets, the pound buying you $1.2722 and €1.1662. The price of gold, £1,514 and 19 pence for an ounce. The FTSE 100 has closed the day at 7,453 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Well, the inquest into the death of Nicola Bulley started today. The mother of two went missing while walking her dog near her home in Lancashire in January. Her body was sadly found in the River Wyre more than 3 weeks later. Now we're joined by GB News' North West reporter, Sophie Reaper, who is outside the County Hall in Preston to give us the latest. Sophie.
Well, good evening to you, Patrick. Day one of the inquest has now come to a conclusion here in Preston. Now, this morning we heard from various experts in their field who explained a bit about the circumstances around Nicola's death. For example, we heard from Dr. Alison Armour, a forensic pathologist, who explained that she believes, anyway, that Nicola's cause of death was indeed drowning and that there was no evidence whatsoever of any kind of third-party involvement. Now, this afternoon, it's been more focused on hearing from some of the locals who live around St Michael's on Wyre, who may have had some kind of interaction with Nicola that morning. For example, some of the mums who also have children at the local primary school who described seeing her and their interactions, as well as one mother who was also chatting with Nicola on social media, trying to set up a play date with their 2 children for the following day. We also heard from DC Sophie Greenhalgh, a constable in Lancashire Police, who has been investigating data from Nicola's iPhone and the Fitbit that was recovered from her body. Now, interestingly, the data on the Fitbit, he was telling the inquest, is recorded in 15-minute increments. And when we look at that data, it showed that between 8 and 9:30 that morning, she recorded 4,548 steps. But once we got to 9:30, no more steps were recorded. In a similar story, in terms of distance, between 8 and 9:30, Nicola covered 3.5 kilometres. But once again, when we reach 9:30, there is no more data recorded, which means that window that police had been looking at between the last time she is known to have used her mobile phone at 9:18 and then 9:30, that gives us that window when it's likely she would have gone into the river. Now, as I say, the inquest day one is now completed, but we're expected the second and final day tomorrow here at County Hall in Preston.
Sophie, thank you very, very much. It's Sophie Reaper there, GB News' North West reporter, just keeping you right up to date with the very latest from the inquest of Nicola Bulley. That case, of course, that absolutely gripped the nation for quite a long period of time, around 3 weeks, until the worst was confirmed. Now, the chief executive of Ofwat has written to South East Water asking for an urgent meeting after it imposed a hosepipe ban. It comes as homeowners call for tougher punishments for failing water firms due to months of poor water supply. It's been revealed that companies are now asking people to tell them if their neighbours break the hosepipe ban, which could leave them facing a £1,000 fine. But I was wondering, would you snitch on your neighbour? With me now to discuss this further, I'm joined by broadcaster and journalist and friend of the show. It's Mike Parry. Mike, would you snitch on your neighbour?
Oh, yes, definitely. In my view, water doesn't belong to anybody. Water comes out of the sky. Water's free, and it should be free to all of us. Now, I know somebody's got to process it, but the problem is the laxity of regulation which surrounds water companies in this country is absolutely disgraceful. They make millions and millions of pounds. Their shareholders go away with big dividends. And do you know, Patrick, it is over 30 years since we built a new reservoir in this country. Isn't that disgraceful? We're one of the wettest countries in the world. We have rain falling on us nearly every day, particularly in the north of England. Why can't we channel the water down from the north to the south to give it to the people in the southeast of England? But to get back to your original question, if somebody next door is using their hosepipe during the hosepipe ban...
Oh, his neighbours got in touch and reported Mike to Ofcom, right? And Mike's just been biffed straight away. I mean, good grief, we can't possibly have that. To be honest with you, I wouldn't snitch on my neighbour because I'd be terrified. Mike, OK, here we go. Now, look, Mike, if you snitched on your neighbour, right, if you snitched on your neighbour, would you not be terrified that they'd just start snitching back on you for all sorts? It's like mutually assured destruction, isn't it?
No, I don't break the law. I am a very good citizen. And I believe in the rules and regulations of society. That's what a good, stable society is all about. Now, anybody arrogant enough to think, oh, there's a hosepipe ban, but I'll get my hosepipe out and I'll start watering my plant. You don't need to water any grass, by the way, Patrick, as I'm sure you know. If water doesn't get onto a lawn for 2 months and turns brown, that does not matter. It's all aesthetic, because when rain does come again, the grass will turn green again. All the roots will just flourish up again and become green. But at the moment, you see, I think that some of the people who are going to be the hose pipe ban breakers are those people working from home. And if you're working from home, you've got more time to mess around with your hose pipe. You should actually be in the office, not working from home, and then you wouldn't be able to get your hose pipe out. It is a social crime. I know crime is a strong word when you're talking to people watering their lawn, but if you're stealing somebody else's water and you're stealing my water,
But
eventually that puts up the price of
one
water.
One of the problems, though, Mike, is that there actually is enough water. It's the fact that these companies that have been making quite large profits have not actually been investing in the infrastructure enough, have they? So really, this is the thing. If there was no water in the reservoir, if the reservoirs were completely empty, I'd be like, look, yeah, you're a deranged lunatic here. You're spraying water all over your front lawn. It's mean. It's horrible. You're a terrible person. But actually, if we do have enough water, then I think, well, crack on and water your lawn, and it's the big companies that should be doing better.
Yeah, look, on the preservation of water, as I've already mentioned, we haven't built a reservoir in this country for 30 years, OK? Now, my old mum, God bless her soul, she died a couple of years ago. Her house in Bournemouth, I got the workmen to go round there and fit 2 water butts, one on either side of the house. So when it rained, the water ran off the roof and it ran into the water butt, and then in the summer, my mum could use the tap on her water butt and get water into a watering can and water the grass. Why isn't that standard procedure in building regulations in this country? That every home, we have all these regulations about, you've got to protect your home from heat loss and all that. You should also protect the amount of water that falls on your home and falls in your garden. You should collect it, not only as a good citizen, but as part of the way society runs. We shouldn't let water run away.
No, look, I agree with you, Mike. Look, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. What I love about you, right, is that you've always got solutions to whatever problem that the world has got, right? You've always got ideas. Yeah.
Patrick, believe me, I never bring anybody problems. The reason I've been so successful throughout my career in the media is, as all my bosses have told me, Mike Parry doesn't bring us problems, he brings us solutions.
Yeah, gosh, if only my bosses here could say the same about me. Mike, thank you very much. Mike Parry, broadcaster, journalist as well, friend of the show, friend of the channel. Right now, there are just 2 days to go until I dance on stage with a group of male strippers. Of course, I'm doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. So to get ready for my big night, I got my chest waxed on Saturday because you wonderful people raised 60 grand. I said I'd do it if you raised 60 grand. You did it. I'm a man of my word. It hurt a lot. I'll show you the clip very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, 2 days to go until I dance on stage with the Dream Boys. I think we can all agree we can't wait for this to be over, can we? But they are the most famous group of male strippers in the UK. I am doing it for a very important cause. It's for the mental health charity Mind. There is an epidemic of male suicide at the moment. Every single day, 12 men take their own lives. Suicide kills more men under the age of 40 than cancer, road traffic accidents, and in fact, anything else. It's the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40, which is just absolutely mind-blowing when you think about it, isn't it? Thanks to everybody who's been donating. It seriously does mean the world to me. Some people have given, like, a couple of grand. Some people have given, like, £2, £3. That's all great. I have actually just quickly been taking notes, because I read on the Just Giving site the comments that people put in, and I'm incredibly touched. I'm very moved, actually, by some of them. A lot of them talking about people that they've lost. I won't name you. I lost my 20-year-old son to suicide. Thank you for raising awareness. Lost a brother and a sister. Thanks for helping. In memory of my brother, lost to suicide, etc. In memory of our niece, who tragically died in June last year. In memory of our friend's son, I lost my brother. This goes on, and my uncle. It goes on and on and on and on. And this just goes to highlight what an absolute disaster it is currently if you've got mental health problems in this country. And thanks to you wonderful people, we have raised more than £69,000. In fact, we've raised just over £1,000, I think, this show. Here is the link, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Now, I promised you that if you donated, I would try to get myself into a little bit of decent shape. So it's time for me to reintroduce you to our old friend, Fat Trick Christys. Here is a picture of what I looked like when I had a fighting weight of 15 stone 8 pounds. There we are. What a trundling lard arse. But there was a little problem, which is that immediately after I promised to lose weight, I put more weight on. There he is. Built like a stuffed olive. Anyway, you guys kept donating, and so it really was the only right thing for me to do is try to hold up my end of the bargain. So in the past few months, I have actually lost 4 stone. And here is a picture of me earlier today, before the show. There we go. Yes, a lot of people pointing out the right arm looks bigger than the left. I can assure you it's just the lighting. I will not be going blind anytime soon. You might notice here that there is a significant difference in that I no longer have chest hair, and that is because I said that if you guys raise £60,000, then I will wax my chest. I am a man of my word. I don't know how you spent your Saturday, but here's what I did with mine. Do you do many men?
Yes.
Oh, OK.
Okay. Just to let me know how is temperature.
Oh, it's hot. Nice. Good.
Yeah. Initially you will feel hot.
Oh! Here is you doing it already. OK. Oh, wow.
Okay. That was any sandwich happening.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It is so hard not to swear. Yeah, the nipple did it for me. Anyway, as I said moments ago, I'm doing this to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. I'm delighted to say we have raised now, yes, nearly £69,500. Thank you very much to everybody who's given money. You can donate justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Every little helps. Michelle Dewberry joins me now. How are you?
I am very disappointed by how little chest hair you have. I thought you'd have like a big old thatch going on.
No.
So I feel that you shouldn't
Short-changed.
Yeah, I do feel a little bit short-changed.
Right.
I feel like you should do a BSc.
Oh, no.
I won't say what it is, everyone, because it's tea time. But if you're very bored or if you know anything about the world of man's waxing, you should Google that, Patrick.
No, I know what it is. I certainly won't be putting that on my search history.
I think that if you get to 70, you should go that little step further.
Do you think?
Yeah, I do, because looking at you, you've got a good head of hair on you.
I'm not shaving
I just
that
thought, I thought that would have continued. But now that I've seen your chest, I do feel a bit shortchanged.
Do you? I
do.
am absolutely not committing live on air to wax my nether regions.
I think that you should. A minute ago, you was talking about the importance of suicide. It's a very key issue. And I think, why don't you...
There's no way you're doing this. I'm sorry, but there is absolutely no way you are doing this.
If you get to 70, I think you should do that. I don't want you to film it. I've got no interest in seeing those kind of things, but why not?
OK, I don't know if I can be guilt-tripped into that level. Anyway, right, very quickly, what have you got coming up?
Peter Hitchens has been released from prison and he's on my programme next. True story as well. We've got it all coming up, including... I know, true story, yes. Including £169,000. That news has just broke. The cost to send people to Rwanda, is that a good price or not? Good deal? You tell me.
Hey, right, it's going to be brilliant. Michelle Dewberry up next with Jubes and Co. See you tomorrow, people.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. You've probably noticed a fresher feel out there today after a humid weekend. Most places seeing sunny spells, but there are still a few showers around across parts of the north in particular. In the south, high pressure is in control, so although we've seen 1 or 2 showers, it's mostly dry here. Behind me, lurking for tomorrow, another set of weather fronts that will bring some further spells of rain in. More on that in a moment. Let's go through the rest of today, because there are some heavy showers over northeast England, eastern Scotland, but they are fading. Most places becoming dry through this evening, and for many it's a dry and a clear night. But in the west, that weather system we saw will be bringing cloud, and then by dawn some rain to Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland. A reasonably mild night, warmer than last night, but not as warm and humid as it was over the weekend. So the details for Tuesday. It may well start bright across parts of the Midlands, eastern England.